Chapter 220. Seeing Tan Taiyu enter the gate of the state guest house, Su Li, who was hiding in the dark, turned away. She didn't ask the identity of her senior fellow apprentice, because she chose to see it by herself. In fact, as she expected, her senior fellow apprentice had an extraordinary background. Thinking of the mechanism in the underground addendum and the golden crown on his head, he could only be the prince of Tianji country except for Wei Yuran. He used to be the apprentice of Qi Xianqing, the royal preceptor of Dahan country, but he was the prince of Tianji country. Su Li was lost in thought. There was a lot of information. For Qi Xianqing, although the old man was really good to her and gave her a big gift after she was reborn, she had never opened her heart to Qi Xianqing. In addition to the fact that she had just been reborn and could not trust anyone, it was also because of Qi Xianqing's mysterious background. In the previous life, she had heard the news of Qi Xianqing when she was successful in cultivation. His age and origin were secrets. The longest lifespan of a warrior of the inborn realm was 200 years. He lived for more than 200 years. He broke the taboo and was not tolerated by the world. Some people said that he was not a human, so he had a long life. In this way, she was naturally vigilant to the apprentice of Qi Xianqing. If this person was ordered by Qi Xianqing to take the full moon and heartstrings, what should she do? Su Li's expression changed for a few seconds and soon calmed down. The full moon and heartstrings was of great use to her. She couldn't give it to others easily. In the following days, Su Li prepared the things for the auction in the affiliated school. Tan Taiyu was attracted by the three princes and couldn't leave. He didn't come again. As the time of the auction approached, the atmosphere in Yunjing City became tense. More and more disputes broke out suddenly. Hu Daiden was busy for a while. Fortunately, the martial arts forces were still afraid of the Dongfang family. Otherwise, Hu Daiden would have been thrown into the moat to feed the fish with his cultivation. Chu Lu sent a lot of detailed information about the forces in Yunjing City. She had been dormant in Yunjing City for many years. In addition, Elder Dao lost his fighting power because of Su Li. He had gone back to the headquarters of the Hehuan sect. The new elder hadn't come yet. The control of the branch of the Hehuan sect naturally fell into her hands. Su Li didn't look at it again after a few glances. She didn't care about these small forces. Only a few forces could influence the result of the auction. She had to be well prepared to deal with all unknown changes. On the 5th day of the 12th lunar month, it snowed heavily in Yunjing City. The whole Yunjing City was covered with heavy snow in a blink of an eye. It was quiet between heaven and earth. Even the sound of fighting in the streets could not spread far. "Young master, be careful not to catch a cold." Ling Li stood under the eaves and stared at the sky calmly. Ling Xian put a cloak on him considerately. The master and the servants stood in the courtyard, which outlined a quiet and beautiful picture. "Is there any movement from Mr. Li?" Ling Li suddenly said and broke the silence. Ling Xian's smile froze on her face. Master asked Mr. Li, but she heard Su Li. Mr. Li's whereabouts have always been erratic. It is said that he has not appeared in the Lin Li building for many days. Ling Xian calmed herself down and answered. What she said was true. She had the idea of meeting with Mr. Li to seek cooperation. Unfortunately, Mr. Li had disappeared for many days. She could only restrain her thoughts and continue to wait. Ling Li's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes were gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. In the state guest house, the forces of Tianji country and the forces of Nanjiang country each occupied half. Although they tested each other, they restrained each other. As there were only 3 days left before the auction, the restraint became more and more obvious. "Fourth Lord, I found it." Another force of the Wei family in Yunjing City is in the embroidery workshop. A handsome young man who looked like a manservant ran to Tan Taiyu and whispered in his ear. Tan Taiyu looked indifferent and waved his hand. The handsome young man immediately retreated and closed the door. At the moment when the manservant closed the door, there was one more person in the room. Tan Taiyu was surprised and bowed his head to salute. "Master, you are here." Qi Xianqing stroked his white beard and said with a smile, "How is it you? Have you seen your junior sister apprentice?" Tan Taiyu nodded with a wry smile and told the general situation of meeting Su Li. Qi Xianqing was surprised and immediately felt more gratified. He said, "The girl finally matured. I am afraid that she suffered a lot in Yunjing in the past 6 months." "Master, you don't know. In fact, junior sister apprentice is the biological daughter of Dongfang Ru." Tan Taiyu lowered his voice a lot. Qi Xianqing was slightly stunned. There was a complex expression in his eyes. He sighed, "I deliberately avoided Dongfang Shao in these years. I was afraid to have a relationship with the Dongfang family again. I didn't expect that man proposes but God disposes." Tan Taiyu heard the words and said with a smile, "Master, don't worry. Junior sister apprentice is still surnamed Su. She hasn't returned to the Dongfang family." Qi Xianqing was stunned and asked, "Why?" Tan Taiyu told him about his investigation. Qi Xianqing was silent. He didn't expect that Su Li experienced so many things in Yunjing in less than a year. When Qi Xianqing heard that Zhu Yan and Su Zipei were imprisoned and punished respectively, Su Li finally didn't plead for them. Qi Xianqing's eyes were wet. This girl finally lost her kind heart and learned to seek justice for herself. Now Yunjing is mixed with crooks and honest people. I just found out that there are activities of the Hahuan sect and the Lianshi cult. Not to mention that this place is the base camp of the Yinma cult. Maybe our actions are seen by them. If we want to help junior sister apprentice get the full moon and heartstrings, I am afraid. Tan Taiyu was worried and told the purpose of this trip. He and Qi Xianqing appeared here to help Su Li get the full moon and heartstrings. Qi Xianqing was silent for a moment and said slowly in a low voice, Have you ever blamed me?" Tan Taiyu suddenly raised his head and looked shocked. He said, "Master, you saved my life and taught me everything. I can't repay you. How can I blame you?" Qi Xianqing sighed in a low voice and said, "But there can only be one successor in each generation of the Ghost Valley. The next master of the Ghost Valley is your junior sister apprentice. Although you practice the Ghost Valley meditation direction, I can't even give you the title of a formal disciple." Tan Taiyu heard the words and suddenly smiled gently and brightly. He said, "Master, why do you care about these empty titles?" "I don't care. There are not many things that I can grasp in my short life. I am very lucky to meet you. Since junior sister apprentice is expected to regain the glory of the Ghost Valley, I will fulfill your wish even if I have to sacrifice my life." This sentence was sincere, and even Qi Xianqing couldn't help but be moved. The heartless mentality that had been built for more than 100 years was like a smooth mirror. There was a crack and a light sound was heard. Cough, cough, cough. Qi Xianqing coughed violently and spat out black blood. Tan Taiyu was immediately shocked and wanted to support Qi Xianqing, but he was stopped by Qi Xianqing. Tan Taiyu said a few words that he couldn't understand. "It's okay. I deserve it. It's an old problem." After breathing for a moment, Qi Xianqing calmed down and looked at Tan Taiyu with a more complicated expression. It's my luck to meet you, in the Hongyan house. Miss Chu, I haven't seen you for many years." The coquettish voice echoed in the air. When Chu Lu saw the new elder of the Hahuan sect, she turned pale and her blood almost froze. The hierarch actually sent him out. Could Mr. Li really deal with him? "Don't worry, Miss Chu. As long as I am here, no matter the Lianshi cult or the Yinma cult, they can't take the full moon and heartstrings from me." The young man, who was more coquettish than a woman, smiled and squinted. He said, "That is the gift I want to give to Sister Hierarch." In the huge embroidery workshop in Yunjing City, senior embroidery artificers came and went. In the corner courtyard of the embroidery workshop, a group of people in black who knew nothing about embroidery gathered together. "Remember, we are all the most loyal dogs to our master. Even if we die, we will help our master get the full moon and heartstrings." Lin Yanxing stood upright in the crowd and looked indifferent. When he heard the leader's words, his eyes flickered slightly and he looked gloomy. He was not a dog. He had been struggling at death's door for only one purpose. He had lost all his potential in exchange for a high cultivation. Revenge. He wanted all the people who had destroyed him to die without a place to be buried. "The Su family and the Yen family, when I get out of trouble, you all wash your necks and wait for me. In the third prince's mansion." Tao Zisong looked solemn and looked at the Yunjing City auction house. Teacher, I have prepared everything for you. I wish you a victory. Dongfang Lang appeared behind him and saluted respectfully. Behind him, there were hundreds of expressionless corpse puppets of the inborn realm. Under the attic, 8 elders of the Lianshi cult bowed to him from a distance. This time, I must fight for a future for the Lianshi cult. In the Dongnuan pavilion of the Yangxin Palace, Dongfang Shao was lying on the bed calmly, and a large number of elite guards in black knelt down in front of him. There were about 40 or 50 of them, and each of them was at least in the inborn 5th hurdle. The whole Dongnuan pavilion was trembling with the slight breathing sound when their breaths were mixed together. Reporting to Patriarch, everyone has assembled. The leader raised his head and said, he didn't call Dongfang Shao the emperor, but the head of the family. They were the real power to maintain the Dongfang family's control of the world. Dongfang Shao narrowed his eyes, and a cunning light flashed in his turbid eyes. He said, remember, your task is not to kill the enemy, but to find out the details of all the forces, especially the Yinma cult and the Linli building. These 2 forces hid too deeply. Even though he had controlled the Dahan country for more than 10 years, he not only failed to uproot the Yinma cult, but also didn't know whether the hierarch child was a man or a woman. How aggrieved he was. And Mr. Li was also mysterious. No one knew whether he was a man or a woman. His power was the most terrible. Child Li and Mr. Li, are there any connections between them? Dongfang Shao played with the rui in his hand, and his eyes were cold. He said, it is a good deal to exchange the information of these 2 people with a full moon and heartstrings. Chapter 221. The rooster crowed, and the sky shimmered. Ling Li, who was lying on the bed, suddenly opened his eyes. His cultivation method was special. He didn't need to keep the posture of meditation. He could practice even lying down or walking. Master, get up. Ling Xian came quickly. Ling Li got dressed. Although she was the holy girl of the Yinma cult, she was willing to stay with Ling Li and take care of him. After breakfast, Ling Li sat in the wheelchair and pondered. He took the box of silver needles and hesitated for a moment. Then he sealed his tendons and meridians and became a disabled person temporarily. Master, Ling Xian called him with a little worry. Even if the tendons and meridians were unlocked immediately, they would be blocked. If a strong enemy attacked at that time, Ling Li would be in danger. Ling Li shook his head and smiled. It doesn't matter. You and Ling Mo can protect me. I have enough time to react. Hearing that, Ling Xian raised her pink lips and said in a low voice, I will protect the young master. At this time, Ling Mo came in from the door with a dignified look. Master, the carriage is ready. Ling Li propped up his body with his hands and changed his sitting posture. He waved his hand lazily and smiled evilly. Let's go. If we are late, there will be no fun. In the yard, Ling Qinglan was already waiting in front of the carriage. Qiu Meng stood in front of the door and said worriedly, Qinglan, take good care of your brother. She knew how dangerous the auction fair was, but she couldn't stop Ling Li from going. She could only hope that there would be no big trouble at the auction fair. Ling Qinglan smiled and nodded. Don't worry, Aunt. Even if something happens to me, I won't let Brother Li be in danger. But he cursed in his heart. Even if there was danger, Ling Li's cultivation was enough to defeat those dregs. The only thing he needed to worry about was that his identity would be exposed. Oh, Mother. This is Yunjing City. There is no danger at the foot of the emperor. Qinglan, let's go. If we are late, we can't go in. Ling Li impatiently patted the wheelchair. The crown on his head, which was straightened by Qiu Meng, was crooked again. If he didn't wear luxurious clothes, he would look like a street punk. Qiu Meng was so angry that her face turned blue. She scolded, Li, get off. You are not allowed to go today. Look at what you're wearing. How can you ruin the hair that Xian combed for you? If you continue like this, who would be willing to marry you? Ling Li was annoyed and hurriedly urged Ling Qinglan to leave. Fortunately, Qiu Meng just got angry and didn't really stop them. The carriage left smoothly. Looking at the direction where the carriage left, Qiu Meng sighed. What she said was true. Ling Ping didn't marry, and Ling Li couldn't marry. She and her mother didn't know when they could have grandchildren. It was really unfortunate. On the other side, Su Li walked out of the affiliated school of the National Academy and stepped on the carriage. Yun Yi, who acted as a groom, was excited. After staying dormant in Yunjing City to practice for many days, the 10 guards of Yunj could finally put their skills to use. Before 7 a.m., the Yunjing auction house was almost full of carriages. Fortunately, the auction house was originally set up around the Shenwu Square. The carriages that couldn't stop were driven there by the royal guards. Su Li had a distinguished status now, so she didn't need to go far. The carriage stopped in the small square set up by the auction house. As soon as she got off, she saw many familiar faces in the previous life. Su Li knew them, but they didn't know her. After glancing at them, Su Li didn't look at them carefully. She took out the blue invitation card. The guards on both sides immediately saluted and said, "Welcome, Your Grace." This sentence immediately attracted the attention of the people around. Unfortunately, Su Li walked so fast that they only saw Yun Yi's back. Su Li entered the auction house through a special passage. It was deserted. At this moment, most of the people were still waiting in line outside. The auction house wouldn't really open until 7 a.m. When she just stood still, a manservant greeted her and said with a smile, "Your Grace, your room is on the 3rd floor. I'll take you there." Su Li nodded slightly. When she was about to walk, she suddenly stopped and looked at another entrance of the auction house. "Oh, isn't it Child Ling without legs, the first child in Yunjing?" Ma Jingtian walked forward and sneered at Ling Li maliciously. He and Ling Li were sworn enemies. It was not easy for him to see no one beside Ling Li. How could he not ridicule Ling Li? Ling Li was lying lazily on the back of the chair. When he heard the words, his ears moved. He tilted his head and squinted at Ma Jingtian. He didn't show weakness and said with a smile, "I was wondering who it was. It turns out that you are the 2nd master in Yunjing City. It's a pleasure to meet you." Then, Ling Li glanced at Ma Jingtian's crotch quietly. Ma Jingtian was immediately annoyed and sneered, "You have been a good-for-nothing for more than 10 years. You only know how to talk. Do you know why no one takes you to the VIP room?" Ling Li was peeling his nails in boredom. When he heard Ma Jingtian's words, he raised his head with interest and said, "I was wondering who was so childish. As I expected, only you, the 3rd master, can do such a stupid thing." "Oh, now it should be the 2nd master." Ling Li laughed happily, but Ma Jingtian's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He was the 3rd son in his family, so Ling Li gave him the ugly title of 3rd Ma. Today, Ling Li went too far. He even insulted Ma Jingtian with 2nd Ma. He couldn't bear it. At this moment, 2 people came in. They were Wei Yuran and Wei Jinjin from Nanjiang country. Wei Yuran felt strange when he saw Ma Jingtian's angry face. He had met the 3rd master of the Ma family before. He was not a person who was easily angered. Why was he so angry with the young man in the wheelchair? When Wei Yuran saw Ma Jingtian also saw him. In Nanjiang country, the Ling family killed the most soldiers of Nanjiang country. Ma Jingtian's eyes brightened. He hurried to greet Wei Yuran and said with a smile, "Brother Yuran, I haven't seen you for a long time. I'm so sorry to let you see my ugly behavior." Wei Yuran shook his head to show that it was okay. Then he looked at Ling Li with doubt and asked, "This is... Oh, let me introduce him." Ma Jingtian's eyes flashed with viciousness. He stared at Ling Li and said word by word, "Brother Yun, you don't know. This is the 1st child in Yunjing City. He is the 3rd son of the king of North, Ling Li of the Ling family." Wei Yuran couldn't help laughing when he heard the first half of the words. Such a playboy dared to call himself the 1st child? When he heard the second half of the words, the smile on his face immediately disappeared. His eyes were full of killing intent. "Are you the descendant of the Ling family?" Ling Li didn't show weakness. He raised his eyebrows and sneered, "So what? This is the territory of Dahan country. Do you dare to kill me?" Chapter 222. They looked at each other for a moment, but it also seemed that a century had passed. Wei Yuran finally looked away, and his smile became genial and bright. Ma Jin-tian breathed a sigh of relief. If Wei Yuran really killed Ling Li, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, he didn't misjudge Wei Yuran's thoughts. At this time, Wei Yuran suddenly walked to Ling Li. He waved his folding fan and looked around the wheelchair. He smiled and said, "It turns out that the third son of the Lord of North has leg problems. No wonder I didn't see you on the battlefield. But everyone in the Ling family is powerful. How can there be a waste like you? I want to have a try." Speaking of this, Wei Yuran's gloomy and cold lips curled up. Suddenly, he kicked the wheelchair hard. "Brother Yuran!" Ma Jin-tian exclaimed, but he was happy in his heart. Someone taught Ling Li a lesson for him. This kick was the best way to vent his anger. Ling Li was frightened and held the chair tightly. But Wei Yuran was in the acquired 8th hurdle. He was so strong that he lifted Ling Li and the chair down the stairs and rolled to the middle of the auction stage. Ah! Bang! Screams echoed in the auction house. The wheelchair hit the last step heavily. The recoil force directly shook Ling Li out and he fell on the hard stone. His clothes were torn and there were several bloodstains. There was a loud bang behind him. It turned out that the wheelchair hit the stone wall of the auction stage and a wheel fell off. Hiss! Ling Li moved his body and grimaced in pain. Wei Yuran was so cruel. If he knocked his head on the middle stage, he would definitely die because he was a waste. He tried to support his upper body to sit up, but his strength couldn't be more than half of that of a normal person. In addition, his lower body was sealed by himself. He couldn't get up no matter how hard he tried. After 2 attempts, Ling Li accepted his fate and lay on the ground motionlessly like a dead dog. Ha! Hearing the laughter of Ma Jin-tian and Wei Yuran behind him, he sighed and thought, "Well, Wei Yuran, if you can get out of Yunjing City alive, I won't be the hierarch anymore." At this moment, Ling Li felt that the light in front of him dimmed. Someone stopped in front of him. He only saw a pair of feet. It was neither Ling Xian nor Ling Qinglan. He tried his best to raise his head to look, but found that he was suddenly being carried horizontally. Ling Li was stunned. Then he finally turned his head and saw a pair of cold black eyes. It was her. "Su Li, princess, let me do it," Yuni couldn't help but remind her. The young miss had a noble status, so how could she be intimate with such a profligate young master? Su Li shook her head and walked to the wheelchair with Ling Li in her arms. She gently put him down. Although one of the wheels of the wheelchair was broken and the soft cloth cushion on the chair was spilled out, it could still be sat. Ling Li sat down. Before he sorted out his thoughts, Su Li took out a close-fitting embroidered handkerchief and wiped the dirt and blood on his hands for him. Her movements were light and skillful. It seemed that she had repeated it thousands of times. Even Ling Xian couldn't compare with her. He had been pretending to be a playboy, but his face was tense. His deep eyes just stared at Su Li's drooping eyes. It seemed that something was alive in his heart. This time, he couldn't deceive himself anymore. The hatred of the country and the country were not as important as the person in front of him. He was already the lord of a big sect. He always meant what he said and killed decisively. Why did he become timid and worried about gains and losses when it came to Su Li? He killed the enemy and slept with the beauty. He wanted all of them. Su Li looked serious and focused. In the previous life, her disabled husband was quiet and gentle most of the time, but he was depressed and crazy more than once. He fell off the simple wooden chair and lay on the ground in embarrassment. Every time, she hugged her husband like this. Regardless of the reason, she wiped his wounds quietly. "Although I am not your wife in this life, at least, let me wipe your wounds again, Ling Li." Suddenly, a bewildered voice interrupted their thoughts. "Princess Li?" Su Li stopped her movements and raised her head. She looked a little cold. Seeing Wei Yuran approaching, she said calmly, "Second prince of Nanjiang country, this is not a gentleman's behavior. Even if the third child of the Ling family is ignorant and incompetent, you don't care about your life and bully others. It's too much." Wei Yuran was slightly stunned. He thought of Su Li's modesty and gentleness 2 days ago. She was not as strong and indifferent as she was today. However, he was taught a lesson by a woman. His good impression of Su Li faded away. He slightly lowered his eyebrows and eyes, and a kind of pressure came to Su Li. You are just a princess. How dare you give orders to the prince of a neighboring country? Yun Yi immediately stood in front of Su Li and waved his hand to disperse the pressure. He looked at Wei Yuran, his sister, and Ma Jintian coldly. In his eyes, there was only Su Li. He didn't care whether they were princes or emperors. Seeing that Su Li had a servant of the inborn realm, Wei Yuran's expression changed slightly. He restrained his breath and glanced at Ma Jintian. Then he left with his sister. At this moment, he understood that he was used by Ma Jintian. Ma Jintian smiled disapprovingly when he became enemies with Wei Yuran. What he did was an overt plot. Wei Yuran was willing to be tricked. He was scolded by Su Li, but he still blamed Ma Jintian. He was really stingy. Su Li just became a princess, but she couldn't wait to take the opportunity to show the power of the royal family. She was just a common girl. He used to think highly of this girl. It was really, thinking of this, Ma Jintian made a fist and palm salute perfunctorily. Then he left with a smile. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. He didn't want to stand here and be watched by others. Let's go. Su Li took a deep breath and was about to leave with Yun Yi. Ling Li suddenly woke up and was about to stop her. But at this time, Ling Xian ran to him in a panic. There were tears on her delicate face. Her eyes were full of worry and self-blame. She said, "Master, I'm late." Su Li glanced at Ling Xian and then left without hesitation. Only Ling Li's eyes were still fixed on her back. Ling Xian quickly took out a handkerchief to wipe Ling Li's wound. But she saw that Ling Li held a fragrant handkerchief tightly in his hand. Her face was full of concern. Whose handkerchief was it? It was her. Ling Xian suddenly raised her head and saw Su Li's back turning around the stairs. A haze flashed through her watery eyes. Su Li, you really deserve to die. When she came to the VIP room on the 3rd floor, Su Li looked up at the nameplate of the Lord Rui's mansion. She narrowed her eyes and walked in. The auction house was the property of the Dongfang family. Dongfang Rui's room could only be described as luxurious. All the furniture and decorations were valuable. Under the whole transparent wall polished by colored glass, there were 2 benches paved with animal skin. Su Li sat on them and felt soft. The servants of the Lord Rui's mansion lined up behind her. As long as Su Li gave any order, they would immediately do it. All except Yun Yi go out. Su Li said faintly. Everyone immediately responded respectfully and left with light steps. Yun Yi looked at Su Li's perfect side face. A trace of tenderness flashed through his drooping eyes. It was a good thing that the master trusted him and was close to him. There were melons and fruits offered by small countries on the table. Su Li picked them up and tasted them. Then she put them down again and picked up the auction list beside the fruit plate. She could see the auction order clearly. Su Li glanced at the bottom and saw the 4 words, full moon and heartstrings. She looked indifferent. Then she glanced at other auction items and gently put down the list. She thought for a while. Dongfang Rui was from the auction house, so he naturally couldn't participate in the auction. But Su Li, whose surname was Su, could take advantage of a loophole and come to the auction. Dongfang Rui had been dormant for years. He accumulated a huge amount of wealth by relying on the auction house and the restaurant industry. This time, he gave all of it to her for her to squander. However, even if the money could buy the full moon and heartstrings, she would never buy it. Today, whoever bought the full moon and heartstrings would be the target of public criticism. If she wanted this treasure, she had to consider whether her strength could withstand the storm. The Linli family was small and couldn't be exposed in front of others. The identity of the Lord Rui's mansion was sensitive. She couldn't rely on either of them. But even so, she still regarded the full moon and heartstrings as the treasure in her pocket. A divine light flashed in Su Li's eyes. The water in Yunjing City was just beginning to be muddy. She could still fish. In the VIP room of the Ling family, Ling Li wiped the blood on his arm with Ling Xian's handkerchief. Su Li's handkerchief had been put away by him. He was reluctant to wipe it. Ling Qinglan's face was gloomy. Ma Jintian and Wei Yuran dared to fight in the auction house. They were really audacious. How about the investigation of the forces of the Nanjiang country? Looking at the guests from all sides who came to the auction house one after another, Ling Li narrowed his eyes. Ling Xian nodded with a little worry. She hesitated for a while and said, "But if we fight, we will inevitably expose our forces to the royal family." "Master?" Ling Li waved his hand to interrupt Ling Xian. He whispered with a smile, "How can I give the old thing Dongfang Shao a chance? I'd better learn from Mr. Li this time. The Li Jue pill of the Lianshi cult is also annoying." Ling Qinglan's eyes flashed. He understood the meaning of Ling Li's words. He smiled and said, "I'll arrange it." Ling Li nodded slightly, but then shook his head and said, "It's not urgent. After the auction house, the most urgent thing is the full moon and heartstrings. Up until now, your life has been borrowed." Hearing that, Ling Qinglan sat down again. His eyes were calm. Ling Li was right. He had to settle the score with the Lianshi cult. The favor of Su Li and Mr. Li was more important. Even if everyone in the world coveted the full moon and heartstrings, he must try his best to get this treasure. Ling Xian, who stood beside them, slightly flashed her eyes and said softly, "We have already arranged, people. No matter who finally wins the full moon and heartstrings, this treasure will fall into our hands through the auction house." Ling Qinglan shook his head and said, "Don't look down upon the people in the world. There are too many forces participating this time." Although the Hahuan sect and the Lianshi cult were fooled by Mr. Li before, they were still the 9th grade sects on the same level as the Yinma cult. If they looked down upon them, they would only suffer losses. "Tell Ling Imo to be careful," Ling Li ordered with his eyes gloomy. As soon as he finished speaking, a heavy bell rang in the auction house. Dang dang dang. Chapter 223. After the bell rang, the ordinary seats were full. The ordinary warriors whispered to each other, and it was as noisy as a vegetable market. The ordinary seats didn't need any identity and only needed to pay 1,000 taels of silver as the admission fee. The entire auction house could accommodate tens of thousands of people to bid at the same time. Even if nothing was sold in this auction, they would make a lot of money. Suddenly, the whole hall was quiet. A well-combed old man in a splendid robe walked out from the back hall of the auction house. Many people's eyes flashed when they saw him. He was Eunuch Feng, a servant of Dongfang Shao. He presided over the auction house, which was enough to prove that the royal family attached great importance to this auction house. Eunuch Feng served Dongfang Shao all year round, so he was not nervous about a mere auction house. He walked to the high platform and cupped his hands to all directions. "Today, I preside over today's auction house as the steward of the Dongfang family. I hope that all the people in the martial arts circle will give me some face and don't make trouble at the auction house. Otherwise, it will be regarded as a provocation to the Dongfang family." As soon as he said that, many warriors with different ideas were slightly shocked. The royal family of the Dahan country was so domineering this time. Some people understood that Eunuch Feng meant that whatever happened after the auction house had nothing to do with the Dongfang family. As long as the people of the Dongfang family were not offended, they could do whatever they wanted. It's a bit interesting. In the inconspicuous VIP room on the second floor, the coquettish young man touched his blood-red lips with his fingertips and looked at the light black curtain wall diagonally opposite. His blood-red eyes flashed. Tao Zisong seemed to feel something and frowned to look downstairs. But he couldn't see the scene inside because of the glass curtain wall. There were many seniors hiding in the auction house. If he rashly released his psychic awareness, he would be stupid. Find out which force belongs to that VIP room. Tao Zisong gave the order. Immediately, someone left the VIP room silently. The 8 elders around him also looked tense. Although their cultivation was much higher than Tao Zisong's, they were led by him. Tao Zisong gave up his identity and lurked in the Dahan country for many years for the Lianshi cult. They were convinced by such a person. Ahem, as Eunuch Feng coughed slightly, the noise faded away. Many people focused on the high platform again. The auction officially begins. Before he finished his words, a manservant immediately put down a tray covered with a red cloth on the high platform. Eunuch Feng didn't talk nonsense. He lifted the white cloth with one hand and showed a long sword that emitted a faint cold air. The first one is the last sword forged by Master Shur 100 years ago, the Cold Wind Sword. The starting price is 100,000 taels of silver, and each increment must not be lower than 1,000 taels of silver. As soon as this item appeared, the hall on the first floor was in an uproar. What? This is Master Shur's last work. This item is extremely valuable. Even if it's useless, it's still worth 1,000,000 taels of silver. Shallow. Every weapon refined by Master Shur is a rare treasure. One look at this Hanfeng sword and you can tell that the body of the sword is made of 10,000-year-old cold iron, which is not inferior to the spiritual sword. It's more than 1,000,000. I bid 500,000 taels. 1,000,000 taels. 5,000,000 silver taels. 10 million. The price rose rapidly. Such a treasure at the beginning really aroused the enthusiasm of all ordinary warriors. Without the warm-up, the atmosphere of the auction was directly raised to the highest level. Not long after, the VIP rooms on the second floor also began to bid, but the third floor was quiet, without the slightest sound. Just the work of a dead master refiner was not enough to attract their attention. Of course, if Master Shur was still alive, the price of this work would be completely different. Bang. 30 million taels of silver, the third time. Congratulations to the guest number 22. The Cold Wind Sword is yours. Please wait for a moment. A supervisor of the auction house will go to complete the transaction with you alone. In the number 22 room, Tan Tai-yu, who changed his appearance, sighed slightly. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but feel strange. Why do you buy this sword? There were many skilled craftsmen in Tianji country. Although this kind of sword was acceptable, it was only worth a base price of 100,000 taels in Tianji country. In his eyes, Tan Tai-yu's behavior was undoubtedly a waste. Even if he had money, he couldn't spend it like this. Tan Tai-yu said with a smile, "Last time I went to see Junior Sister Apprentice, it was too abrupt. I have been thinking about what gift to give to Junior Sister Apprentice. When I saw this sword, I remembered that Junior Sister Apprentice seemed to lack a good weapon. The road to Tianji country is far away. I can't go back to Tianji country to save money, right?" "You brat," Qi Xianqing scolded with a smile, but he was gratified in his heart. Even if he was gone in the future, he believed that Tan Tai-yu could protect Su Li and let her grow up to be the head of the Ghost Valley who could take charge independently. Su Li on the third floor didn't know that Qi Xianqing was with Tan Tai-yu in the VIP room downstairs. At this moment, she closed her eyes to rest and waited for the arrival of the last moment like other forces. As an old industry, Yunjing Auction House was very sophisticated. The order of the auction items was very delicate. The Cold Wind Sword was sold at a high price of 30 million taels of silver. After the atmosphere was heated up, the following auction items were not eye-catching, but they were also sold at a good price. The auction was very fast. In less than half a day, more than half of the hundreds of auction items were sold. The 55th auction item is a jar of raw Yehua spirits of the Linli building. The starting price is 5 million taels of silver. A manservant brought a small pot of wine and put it in front of Eunuch Feng. The audience was surprised and doubtful. What kind of wine is the Yehua spirits? What kind of wine can sell for 5 million taels of silver? Is the Yunjing auction house cheated? I have heard of the Linli building. It is a restaurant opened by Mr. Li. If it is true, the Yehua spirits must be extraordinary. The crowd whispered. When someone heard this, his disdainful and doubtful expression immediately became surprised. Is Mr. Li comparable to Qi Xianqing? It should be the wine brewed by him. The crowd burst into a loud discussion. When Qi Xianqing heard it, he couldn't help but feel strange. Mr. Li. He had lived for more than 200 years, but he had never heard of such a person. Eunuch Feng pressed his hands with a smile and said, "Don't be impatient, everyone. Yunjing Auction House has always been honest in doing business. It is reasonable that the raw Yehua spirits can be sold for 5 million taels of silver. After the appraiser of the auction house appraised it, we found that it is not only a rare wine in the world, but also has the effect of dispelling the cold poison." Speaking of this, Eunuch Feng paused and said, "However, the Yehua spirits are not completely without drawbacks. The raw liquor is too strong and is not suitable for ordinary people. Only warriors whose cultivation reaches the inborn realm can bear the strength of the liquor. Otherwise, they are easily drunk. As soon as he said that, the warriors in the hall were all in an uproar. The cold poison was one of the strange poisons in the world. Chapter 224. After diluting a jar of the primal wine 100 times, it can be used by ordinary warriors to keep out the cold. After diluting it 10,000 times, even ordinary people can drink it. The starting price of this wine is 5 million. This auction house thinks that there is nothing wrong with it. Eunuch Feng smiled and said the last sentence. I bid 6 million. The atmosphere froze for a moment, and immediately, someone began to bid wildly. The cold poison was not rare. It was very common for warriors living in the north. Every year, countless people died because of the cold air in the north. If the Leanly building opened in the north, it would definitely become the most popular restaurant in the north. 7 million. 8 million. 10 million. The price rose rapidly. Most of these people were martial artist merchants, and they could see ample profits from the fiery wine. If they could obtain this item and sell it to the north, they would definitely be able to make a fortune. In the end, the raw liquor of the Liehua spirits was bought by a warrior businessman who often traveled to various countries at a high price of 15 million. The businessman who didn't get it was not discouraged and began to inquire about the location of the Leanly building. It was believed that after today, the reputation of the Liehua spirits would be completely known. If Su Li did things in the name of the Leanly building, it would be much more convenient. In the VIP room of the Ling family, Ling Li's eyes flickered when he saw the Liehua wine. Did the Leanly building finally announce its existence to the world? As the sun gradually set, night fell, and the auction also came to an end. There were only a few items left, and the bidding became more and more intense. Almost all the people in the VIP rooms were bidding, and the cultivators in the main hall were short of money, so they could only watch the show. The next item is the second last item of this auction, a Qi Shan lotus. After shouting for a whole day, Eunuch Feng's voice was still sharp and loud. I don't need to say more about the effect of this thing. The starting price is 50 million taels of silver. Now let the gold price begin. As soon as these words came out, all the martial artists in the hall went into an uproar. The noise almost overturned the roof of the auction house. Qi Shan Sky Lotus, there's actually such a thing. Is the Dongfang family stupid? Why would they auction this item? I bid 60 million. You want to obtain such a treasure with just 60 million? Are you trying to send a beggar away? I bid 80 million. My Luo Lei sect wants this item. 10 million gold taels. 10 million taels of gold was equivalent to 100 million taels of silver. When the rogue cultivators heard such a price, they were all horrified. They would never be able to earn so much money in their lifetime. Before the person in the VIP room finished speaking, a sneer came from the VIP room opposite the Luo Lei sect. What is the Luo Lei sect? I've never even heard of it. My Flying Star sect is willing to offer 20 million taels of gold. Don't be so arrogant. The Luo Lei sect offers 25 million gold taels. The people in the VIP rooms on the second floor were bidding crazily, causing all the martial artists in the hall to be dumbfounded. This was only the second last auction item, but the final price had already far exceeded their expectations. To be able to witness such a scene, it could be said that this trip was not in vain. The VIP rooms on the third floor and a few VIP rooms on the second floor were still quiet. They were not in a rush to bid. Su Li carefully looked at the jade-like pink lotus on the tray. It seemed that it had just been picked and was still delicate. She was very surprised. In the future, the value of this thing was no less than that of the full moon and heartstrings, or even more. Miss, Yun-Yi couldn't help but remind her, this Qishan lotus has 24 petals. Each petal can make the acquired warrior break through the limit and realize the inborn realm. It is a rare treasure to cultivate the force at that time. Don't miss it. Recently, Miss sent them a lot of auxiliary medicine for practice. The practice of people in the Yunj sect progressed rapidly. They were all shocked by Su Li's medical skills, which could even assist the practice. Yun Yi was quick-witted. He knew that Su Li wanted to cultivate the Yunj sect deeply. Naturally, he was very attentive. Su Li nodded with a smile flashing in her eyes. She didn't refute and said, "Then you bid and buy it." Yun Yi was refreshed and immediately began to bid 35 million gold taels. Lord Rue's mansion had been in charge of various forces for many years. They had plenty of gold. It was not a problem to buy the entire Yunjing City auction house. The VIP room on the third floor bids. "That is, Princess Li, isn't it against the rules?" Someone questioned angrily. "That is Lord Rue's daughter. Although she is called Princess, she has not entered the Dongfang family. Her surname is Su, and she doesn't violate the rules." "I see." There was a lot of discussion in the crowd. Many forces who just came to Yunjing didn't know Su Li's identity. At this moment, they inquired a little and were disdainful. A little princess who had not entered the Dongfang family was not worth being afraid of. The VIP room number 21 bids 40 million gold taels. The VIP room number 11 bids 60 million gold taels. Many big forces were interested in the Qishan Lotus. Yun Yi's bid was soon overshadowed. This time, he didn't bid rashly, but calmly waited for the last moment. Su Li smiled slightly. If the Qishan Lotus only had the effect that Yun Yi said, she certainly wouldn't let Yun Yi bid. After all, AO sword skills could also be used to break through the inborn hurdle. As long as one's comprehension was good enough, he could understand the first 3 levels of AO sword skills in less than 3 years, break through the bottleneck, consolidate the foundation, and master the terrible sword skills. It could be said to kill many birds with one stone. Compared with it, the Qishan Lotus was much inferior. If it was more than 10 years later, the price of the Qishan Lotus would not be so low. At least, it would be dozens of times more expensive, and there would be no market for it. If she remembered correctly, in another 2 years, a relic would appear in Nanjiang country. It was a mansion left by a mighty figure in the real spiritual circle, and it was a mighty figure in the medical circle. Countless extinct prescriptions would reappear, including the life-prolonging pill. The life pill here was not healing, but prolonging life. Every life pill could go against nature and prolong life by 50 years. At that time, the prescription was taken away by Yu Ming, the medicine emperor of the spiritual circle. In the previous life, after she succeeded in practicing and stepped into the martial arts circle, she was fortunate to follow a figure of the evil circle to the spiritual circle and witnessed the whole process of the medicine emperor refining the life pill. The relationship between Yao Huang and that person wasn't shallow, and he didn't hide anything from her, allowing her to secretly memorize the process of concocting the pill. Although she had never obtained the Mount Chi Sky Lotus in her past life and had never tried to concoct the life-continuing Dan, with her attainments in pill concoction, as long as she recalled the process, it wouldn't be a problem for her to concoct the life-continuing Dan. Su Li's eyes flashed slightly. Qi Xianqing was about to die. How could she not see it? She just didn't say it. She owed Qi Xianqing a lot of favors. The second half of the Ghost Valley meditation direction couldn't pay it off. Although she didn't know how Qi Xianqing could escape the limit of heaven and earth in the previous life, in this life, she would prolong Qi Xianqing's life. Just when Su Li was lost in deep thought, the price of the Qishan Lotus had risen to 190 million taels of gold. Every time, there was a long interval before someone continued to raise the price. Yun Yi hesitated and looked at Su Li. Su Li smiled slightly and pointed to the lotus on the tray. "Get it at all costs." Yun Yi's expression became firm. He turned his head and said, 200 million taels of gold. Wow! This was the first treasure in today's auction whose price exceeded 200 million taels of gold. How could it not be shocking? Princess Li is really bold. Let's quit. Someone said in a gloomy tone with bad intentions, "I'm afraid that Princess Li has the money to buy the treasure, but she doesn't have the fortune to enjoy it." Someone took the lead, and immediately there was a burst of laughter in the field. Yun Yi immediately looked worried. "Miss, after the auction, there will be a chaotic battle. Why don't we leave in advance?" "No, I want to see who will get the last auction item." Su Li seemed to rely on the power of the Dongfang family. She was not afraid at all and refused without hesitation. Yun Yi could only sigh. When the supervisor of the auction came to trade, he left quietly to arrange people. No matter who got the full moon and heartstrings, the whole auction would be in chaos. At that time, there would be countless people who would fish in troubled waters. The miss with the Chishan lotus was like a big red lantern in the dark. She would be the target of public criticism, just like the force who got the full moon and heartstrings. However, no matter how powerful the enemy was, he would try his best to protect the Mississippi. After a short commotion in the auction venue, as a young girl walked to the high platform with a tray covered with a red cloth, the whole venue was silent for a moment, and the tense atmosphere began to spread. Eunuch Feng smiled as if he didn't notice that the atmosphere was getting tense. However, there were two cold-faced middle-aged men on both sides of him. The indifference in their eyes made the warriors in the field change their complexion slightly, and they couldn't breathe well. Some warriors with low cultivation couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and they looked terrified. Warriors at the peak of the inborn realm. And there were two of them at the same time. The royal family is really powerful. The arrogant and coquettish young man of the Hahuan sect also put away his contempt and admitted the overlord strength of the Dongfang family. The rest of the small sects who didn't know the immensity of the sky and the earth trembled with fear and reconsidered the previous threats. Anyway, Su Li had the blood of the Dongfang family in her body. If they hurt her, would it cause the anger of the Dongfang family? Many people thought of this, and the coldness in their eyes was restrained. Even the Dongfang family, who sent warriors to deter the forces in the martial arts circle, didn't expect that this move actually helped to relieve a lot of pressure on Su Li. The last auction item must have been waiting for a long time. I won't say much. Eunuch Feng lifted the red cloth neatly. There was a transparent glass bottle on the golden plate, in which an elixir with a cold color like moonlight lay quietly. The breathing in the hall immediately became heavier, and all the hot eyes were focused on the elixir. Ling Li held his breath slightly, but he didn't look at the full moon and heartstrings, but the young girl. He looked slightly gloomy and asked, "Is that one of us?" Ling Qinglan looked slightly pale and said, "No, it seems that the Dongfang family has found it." Ling Xian, who stood behind the two, looked down with her eyes gloomy. How could she let Su Li get what she wanted? This is the authentic full moon and heartstrings. Any female warrior, as long as she takes this elixir, the full moon immortal mansion will take root in the pubic region and be born by itself. Then she will become a rare talented warrior with unparalleled fighting power. Eunuch Feng's tone became excited and said, "This is a spiritual object of nature. Now the bidding starts. The base price, none." Chapter 225. Silence. It was weird silence. After Eunuch Feng finished his words, there was no sound for a long time. The auction house fell into silence for the first time. Eunuch Feng was not in a hurry and still smiled. He knew that the silence would not last for a long time. The Lianshi cult bids 500 million taels of gold. His words were shocking. Many warriors sitting in the inquiring room were horrified. The people of the Lianshi cult were all cruel and merciless. They killed innocent people indiscriminately. In the territory of the Dahan country, they even reported their names to participate in the auction. "Ha, Elder Tao, you are so bold. In this case, I can't hide it. 600 million taels of gold." A petrifying laughter resounded throughout the auction house, causing many martial artists to have goosebumps all over their bodies. This was not because of anything else, but because this laughter belonged to a man. Tao Zisong's face trembled and he was afraid. He said, "It turns out to be the deputy hierarchua of the Hahuan sect. Hierarchy is paid a lot for the full moon and heartstrings." Not at all. Elder Tao's wisdom is unparalleled. At that time, you must give in to this servant. The coquettish young man's voice was not sharp, but he pretended to be a weak woman's voice. Tao Zisong almost vomited. He could barely cope with it. At this time, Wei Yuran and Tan Taiyu couldn't help but bid one after another. The Wei family of Nanjiang country bids 700 million taels of gold. The Tan Tai family of Tianji country bids 800 million taels of gold. The voices came from the two VIP rooms almost at the same time. Then they looked at the VIP room where the voices came from. Wei Yuran looked indifferent and looked at Tan Tai Yu's room coldly. In the secret competition with Dongfang Xiao, he lost to Tan Tai Yu and had been brooding about it. In addition to his sister's martial arts, no one in the Nanjiang country could surpass him in stratagem or anything else. Tan Tai Yu must die. Suddenly, a surly and evil voice came from all directions in the auction house. The two warriors at the peak of the inborn realm standing on the edge of the high platform changed their expressions slightly and subconsciously approached Eunuch Feng. They couldn't tell where the voice came from. It's so lively. The Yinma cult can't be absent. Tao Zisong and the deputy hierarch Hua changed their expressions almost at the same time. The voice was the hierarch of the Yinma cult, Childly. Childly. The cult leader of the devil cult is here. Is the hierarch of the devil cult actually a woman? Otherwise, why would she come to snatch the full moon and heartstrings? Nonsense. I heard that there is a saintess in the Yinma cult, so I need the full moon and heartstrings. It's terrifying. I can foresee a heaven-shaking battle. I'll leave immediately after the auction. If I get caught up in it, I won't even know how I died. Many martial artists were horrified. Some even had the intention to retreat and quietly left the scene. In the VIP room number 22, Tan Tai Yu and Qi Xianqing looked serious. I didn't expect that the small full moon and heartstrings could gather the three superpowers in the martial arts circle. Qi Xianqing sighed slightly, and his eyes became sharper. It seems that I have to do something. Tan Tai Yu grasped the tactical matrix in his hand tightly. The master knew that he couldn't do it, but he still did it. What was the special effect of the full moon and heartstrings on junior sister apprentice? Tao Zisong's heart was beating fast. He couldn't help but stand up and bow to the void from a distance. Hierarchically, you are a senior in cultivation. Why do you make life difficult for us juniors for the full moon and heartstrings? The coquettish young man said immediately. He actually echoed Tao Zisong's words and said nervously, hierarchically, you are distinguished. Today's auction is just a small scale. Why bother you to come here in person? The two elders spoke at the same time, and many martial artists were shocked on the spot. In their minds, the Yinma cult, the Hehuan sect, and the Lianshi cult were at the same level. Why did the Yinma cult become the leader of the three superpowers? Tao Zisong's legs and stomach were trembling at the moment. The Yinma cult had always been secretive, but he was lucky to see Childly fight in person. He split the enemy in the inborn ninth hurdle into two halves with only one palm. It was really terrible. Although the coquettish young man didn't see Ling Li fight, he was told by Yi Tian that if he came to Yunjing and met Childly, he must not be his enemy. Otherwise, he would lose his life in vain. Hierarchly was such a proud person, but he showed fear in front of Childly, which impressed him deeply. The slightly hoarse laughter echoed again. Childly continued to say, you don't need to be so restrained. I don't care about the full moon and heartstrings. However, the Dahan country is my territory. Since you are here, how can I not do my best as a host? Tao Zisong and Tao Zisong were relieved when they heard Childly's words. But the latter words made them feel nervous at the same time. They felt cold all over. At this moment, the middle-aged man in black who was sitting quietly on the top floor of the back hall of the auction house suddenly opened his eyes with a strange expression. It's strange that I can't find the trace of Childly with my unique psychic awareness. It seems that this person is really a strong enemy, as the head said. Hearing that Childly said that the Dahan country was his territory, the middle-aged man in black looked gloomy. Childly obviously didn't care about the Dongfang family. It was outrageous. Even I can't find the trace of him. It seems that even if the devil is not in the longevity realm, he is not an ordinary person at the peak of the inborn realm. If I report it to the head, I will gain something. The middle-aged man's murmur gradually became lower. His task was not only the Yinma cult. Since he couldn't find the trace of Childly, he would make more efforts on other forces. His eyes flashed. The Hehuan sect and the Lianshi cult dare to covet the territory of the Dongfang family. They don't know what is good for them. The bidding in the hall was still going on. Except for the Hahuan sect, the Lianshi cult and the princes of the two countries who dared to bid, the other forces were also trembling with fear and didn't dare to bid. Now the full moon and heartstrings in Eunuch Feng's hand was a hot potato. They didn't want to lose their lives in the Dahan country without knowing the reason. 2. 5 billion taels of gold. Tan Tai Yu said a shocking number with no expression. It was the income that many small countries couldn't get for 10 years. Wei Yuran sneered and said, "It's boring to continue bidding with gold. The full moon and heartstrings can't be measured by money. Why don't we use the rules of the martial arts circle to decide the bidding price?" Tao Zisong's eyes flashed and he said with a smile, "Child Wei's words are very reasonable. The Lianshi cult offers 10 martial arts stones and 50 middle-grade elixirs. If there is a higher price, the Lianshi cult will withdraw from this competition." As soon as the words came out, Wei Yuran's face immediately became gloomy. He was not the only one who was prepared. Compared with the Lianshi cult, which had a profound foundation, the 3 martial art stones he collected seemed to be too inferior. "Brother?" Wei Shenzhen was worried. It seemed that she couldn't get the full moon and heartstrings immediately. Chapter 226. Eunuch Feng's eyes flashed when he heard the words, "Martial Tao Stone." He nodded repeatedly and said, "The Lianshi cult is the most valuable one. Is there anyone else bidding?" Martial Tao Stone was a rare treasure in the martial arts circle. It was a spiritual stone that recorded the sentiments of the ancestors. After refining, it could greatly activate the thinking of warriors and improve their understanding. It could improve the efficiency of practicing any martial arts skills. It was an extremely powerful treasure that could save time for practice. Tao Zisong took out 10 of them at once, which showed that the Lianshi cult had a lot of resources. "Elder Tao, you are so bold. The Hahuan sect withdraws. Tianji country withdraws." The coquettish young man squinted his eyes and joked. A voice also came from the VIP room number 22. The Inma cult didn't say anything after they said that. 3 of the 4 forces withdrew. No one expected that the owner of the full moon and heartstrings would be born in this way. Eunuch Feng was stunned and immediately announced loudly, "Congratulations to the Lianshi cult for winning the last treasure of this auction, the full moon and heartstrings." The hall was silent for a moment, and then burst into a tide-like uproar. "Elder, the full moon and heartstrings is ours." Tao Zisong was surprised and trembling. He understood the thoughts of other forces. They obviously wanted to get something for nothing. However, he was prepared for it and didn't panic. After the steward brought the full moon and heartstrings and finished the transaction, Tao Zisong glanced at all the elders in the VIP room and said in a low voice, "Everyone, act according to the original plan. Let's go." Without another word, everyone immediately left through the specially arranged passageway of the auction house. The corpse puppets that had been lying dormant outside the auction house began to move, killing all the martial artists who hadn't had the time to escape along the way and all the people who saw them. For a moment, blood splashed into the sky and screams were heard constantly. Tao Zisong's eyes were gloomy. Before leaving the auction house, he suddenly handed the glass bottle to a short and thin elder with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. He secretly transmitted the sound, "Fourth elder, your qinggong is the best and your realm of disguise is profound. You take this thing back to the sect immediately. No mistake." The short and skinny old man opened his mouth wide in shock. This was different from what they had agreed on before. However, he quickly reacted and hid the glass bottle. He nodded solemnly and left. The secret tunnel of the auction house led to the outside of the city, which was known by many people. From the moment the auction ended, countless warriors and forces lurking outside the city stared at the exit, waiting for Tao Zisong and others to come out. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Some martial artists put their ears to the ground and their eyes lit up. "Here it comes." Roar. Countless corpse puppets rushed out like a flood, and it was hard to tell how many real people were among them. Before anyone could react, these corpse puppets split into 3 and fled in 3 different directions. Damn it, which one should I chase? Whatever, let's try our luck. Time was pressing, so the warriors didn't have time to think carefully. They all chased in the direction that they thought was right. A considerable number of warriors with low cultivation didn't chase after them. Instead, they started to fight with their targets as soon as they got out of the auction house. The full moon and heartstrings was not the only treasure sold in the auction house. There were shouts of killing outside, but Su Li was still sitting in the VIP room of the auction house with an indifferent look. Yun-yi came in from outside and said in a low voice with a dignified face, "Miss, it has been arranged. We will escort you back now." A ray of light flashed through Su Li's eyes. She didn't get up but asked aloud, "Yun-yi, who is your master?" Yun-yi didn't understand and said in astonishment, "Miss, of course." Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and said in a more and more strange tone, "Will you listen to any of my orders?" "Of course." Yun-yi knelt down and lowered his head. "The 10 guards of the Yunj sect will go through fire and water for you in this life. Heaven and earth can prove it. Then I want you to commit suicide. Show me which one you want." Su Li's voice suddenly became cold. Yun-yi's pupils contracted violently and he looked up unbelievably. He was shocked to see that Su Li was serious and serious. Was the woman in front of him really the miss who usually took care of them? "What? Are you just saying that you'll do whatever you want?" Su Li picked her nails and her eyes were full of sarcasm. She said disdainfully, "Sure enough, they are all lies. My father raised a group of ungrateful people and even gave you to me as a treasure. How stupid they are." As soon as this remark came out, Yun-yi's face turned pale. The shock in his heart immediately turned into anger and then into sadness. Did their master always think of them like this? Was such a miss really worthy of their following? Yun-yi's breath was slightly rapid, and then he suddenly took a deep breath. His face became cold again. He half knelt on the ground and straightened his body. He said in a flat tone, "Your Grace, you are wrong. My life belongs to you. Since you have an order, I will commit suicide now. This life was given by Lord Rue's mansion. Today I will give it back to you." Yun-yi closed his eyes and suddenly pulled out his long sword without saying a word. He cut his neck fiercely. Ding! A light sound reverberated in Yun-yi's ears. Then a great force came from the sword and directly knocked the long sword in his hand away. Yun-yi opened his eyes in shock. What he saw was the familiar gentle smile of the miss. "I was just joking. You took it seriously." Yun-yi stood up in surprise and doubt. Just now he was full of grief and tried to commit suicide with all his strength. How did the miss, who was not even a warrior of the inborn realm, stop him? When Yun-yi was full of doubts, Su Li clapped her hands and said inexplicably, "Come in." The door of the VIP room was pushed open silently. Fang Yuan and others, who had been disguised by Wen Tingshan, filed in, followed by Yun-er to Yunshi. They all looked a little surprised and scared. They looked at Su Li as if they were looking at a stranger. Everyone passed. This group of people is very loyal and more determined than the 20 people who trained in the secluded site. Fang Yuan stood beside Su Li and secretly transmitted the sound. Su Li nodded slightly. She knew the loyalty of these 10 people in her previous life. Now it was just a small test. The rest were handed over to Fang Yuan and others, and she personally came to deal with Yun-yi. "Miss, what's going on?" Yun-yi finally couldn't help asking. He didn't know a considerable number of people who came in. Su Li smiled slightly and patted Yun-yi on the shoulder. "You will know soon." Now, Su Li's eyes were cold. "Start." As soon as she finished speaking, several people who were originally wrapped in black robes showed their true faces. They were exactly the same as Su Li. Even their clothes were the same as Su Li's. Yun-yi and others were stunned. If they didn't know which one was the real miss before, they couldn't distinguish it at all. It turns out that the miss has been prepared. Yun-yi came to his senses. Just now, Miss was testing his loyalty. Next, everyone put on bamboo hats according to Su Li's instructions. A group of more than 30 people went out of the auction house together. 4 teams were divided from them and escorted the fake Su Li away. The warriors who had been lurking in the dark waiting for Su Li were stunned when they saw so many people in bamboo hats in the same clothes. Then they could only choose one to catch up with. The Lord Rue's mansion is really cunning. They even used the way of the Lianshi cult to leave. We have no chance to win against the royal guards. If we go deep into Yunjing City, our lives will be in danger. Forget it. I don't want the Qishan Lotus. Let's go. Let's go after the Lianshi cult. Under such a plan, many people immediately retreated and turned to chase the people of the Lianshi cult. At this moment, the real Su Li was in cyan clothes and wore a bamboo hat. She changed into the appearance of Mr. Li. In addition to Yun Si, Yun Qi and Yun Jiao who went to distract the attention, Yun Yi and others were also disguised by Wen Tingshan and followed Su Li out of the city. The appearance of such a large group of inborn seniors immediately made many warriors who were fighting outside the city retreat. They all guessed which force had left the city until now. The young man beside Chu Lu is quite difficult to deal with. If we can't get away, how can we chase the people of the Lianshi cult? Su Li smiled and said, "Come with me." Then she took the lead to fly to the waterside pavilion in the south of the city. Her speed was as fast as lightning. Fang Yuan and others were not surprised and immediately followed her. Yun Yi and others were dumbfounded. It turned out that the miss had been an inborn senior for a long time. A 17-year-old warrior of the inborn realm. Master. Yun Er trembled and said. Then he followed her excitedly. It was a great blessing to follow the young master in this life. Follow her. Don't let the master down. Yun Yi's gaze was profound. Only he knew that the young Mrs. Cultivation was absolutely not as simple as the young supremacy stage. She was able to block a full force strike from a congenital fourth stage expert with a single finger. That level of cultivation had already surpassed his imagination. On the other side, Tan Tai-yu controlled the tactical matrix. A machine-operated eagle was overlooking the ground above Yunjing City. It clearly saw the escape of the Lianshi cult. The eagle's eyesight was so strong that it could see the prey hiding in the grass even if it flew in a very high sky. This mechanism was the secret treasure of Tianji country. It was much more powerful than ordinary eagles. The little movements of every group of people of the Lianshi cult were recorded and reflected in Tan Tai-yu's mind. One person left alone and blended into the ordinary warriors. He fled to the south. This person is not any elder of the Lianshi cult. However, the disguise skill. Tan Tai-yu suddenly opened his eyes and said, "There is a result." Qi Xianqing's turbid eyes were full of brilliance. He said, "Take everyone and let's chase them." Just at this moment, a charming smile appeared behind Tan Tai-yu. "Prince of Tianji country, can you give me a ride?" Tan Tai-yu was also an inborn senior. His reaction was very sharp. He immediately retreated and saw the person behind him. Sure enough, it was the people of the Hehuan sect. There were dozens of inborn seniors. Chu Lu was also among them. Her face was very pale. She was forced to come here by the coquettish young man. She was trapped. Tan Tai-yu looked slightly cold. Looking at the people of the Hehuan sect who surrounded them, he was not flustered. Qi Xianqing stood out and said slowly, "Hua Rei, I don't want to be enemies with you. Get out of the way quickly." The coquettish young man was called by his real name. He looked at Qi Xianqing up and down with his bloody eyes. Then he said with a faint smile, "Forgive me. Who are you?" Chapter 227. Deputy Hierarchia, why did the Lianshi cult run away without notifying me? Do you also want to leave in a hurry? Hua Rui's smile froze on his face. He slowly turned around and saw Ling Li wearing a jade bone mask and the masters of the Yinma cult who were twice as many as them. His heart suddenly thumped and his face became gloomy. "Child Li, I respect you as a senior. I don't think I have done anything beyond the rules of your cult. Do you want to kill us for no reason?" At the same time, Hua Rui secretly ordered everyone to gather together to fight against the Yinma cult. Tan Tai-yu and Qi Xianqing got out of trouble and stood aside bitterly. He had no chance to win against either of the two big sections. Today, he was caught in the middle. Tianji country was good at the mechanism secret technique, and it sat on the throne of a country because of the mechanism secret technique. It was absolutely the best country in the world in terms of defense against foreign enemies, but in terms of fighting with others, it had too many disadvantages, which was also the reason why Tianji country never competed for foreign things. When you find a gap, run as far as you can. Although my fighting power is not strong, I am at the peak of the inborn realm. It won't be too dangerous. Tan Taiyu suddenly received the sound transmitted by Qi Xianqing. He was shocked and asked, "What about the full moon and heartstrings of junior sister apprentice?" "Silly boy. You can get the treasure again. But you will lose everything if you die. Do you really think that I only care about your junior sister apprentice's practice and ignore your life?" Tan Taiyu smiled when he was scolded by Qi Xianqing. He said, "I know, master. I will act according to circumstances." Qi Xianqing secretly breathed a sigh of relief. His wrinkled face was dignified. Only Hua Rui in the Hahuan sect had the same cultivation as him, but there were too many people in the Yinma cult who he couldn't see through. It was difficult for you to escape. But at this time, Ling Li's strange voice came from under the jade bone mask. "Miss Chu Lu beside you has been dormant in the capital for many years. If she had done something out of line, I would have destroyed the Hongyan pavilion. For no reason at all? Is Vice Sect Master Hua joking?" Chu Lu stopped breathing and scolded Hua Rui in her heart. Except that she was discovered by Mr. Li, her identity had been well hidden. Otherwise, with the overbearing behavior of the Yinma cult, they would have put their previous words into action. If Hua Rui didn't force her to come here, how could she be exposed? However, I have compassion in my heart. How could I possibly do something that goes against reason and nature? What Ling Li said made Hua Rui relieved, and then he became nervous. It's impolite of the Lianshi cult to leave without telling us. How about the little prince of Tianji country lead the way? If you can find the Lianshi cult, the Yinma cult will reward you. As soon as the words came out, everyone looked at Tan Taiyu. The pressure was like a tide, and Tan Taiyu's calm face was a little pale. Qi Xianqing snorted and stood in front of Tan Taiyu to release the oppression. He stared at Ling Li and said, "Child Li, you can lead the way, but you must ensure that my apprentice is not in danger. Otherwise, you will never get the full moon and heartstrings." As soon as Qi Xianqing said this, Hua Rui was scared. He knew that Child Li hated being threatened the most. Sure enough, the next moment, Ling Li suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed Qi Xianqing fiercely. Boom! A strong suction broke out from his palm. Qi Xianqing was horrified to find that his ability to move was imprisoned in an instant, and he had no power to break free. He could only watch his neck being pinched by Ling Li. "Master!" Tan Taiyu's face changed greatly. He didn't expect that Ling Li would take action without saying anything. "What I hate most in my life is that someone threatens me." Ling Li looked at Qi Xianqing with his evil eyes, and golden light appeared in his eyes. Qi Xianqing immediately felt that his face was hot, as if it was penetrated by magma. "It turns out to be you." Hearing Ling Li's words, Qi Xianqing was extremely shocked. His disguise was actually broken. Seeing that the old man at the peak of the inborn realm fell into Ling Li's hands without resistance, Hua Rui suddenly felt cold and didn't dare to move. All the people behind him also showed fear and didn't dare to breathe loudly. "Let go, my master." Tan Taiyu stared at the pressure, and his blood almost froze, but he still struggled to speak. He tried to maintain a calm tone. "I will take you to the Lianshi cult. You can do whatever you want, but you let go of my master. This is a deal, not a threat." Qi Xianqing gave up struggling and sighed in his heart. Silly boy, this was the devil Child Li. The Yinma cult and the Dongfang family had always been incompatible. He used to be the teacher of Dongfang Shao. Although he and Dongfang Shao had already broken off relations, even if he explained, would the devil listen to him? Suddenly, he felt that his neck was loosened. The sharp, genuine energy drilled into his body like a silk thread and sealed his cultivation. Instantly, Qi Xianqing temporarily became an ordinary person. Qi Xianqing was stunned. Child Li actually let him go. Ling Li showed some appreciation in his eyes and said with interest, "Interesting. Boy of the Tantai family, I will agree with your request. But if you can't find the whereabouts of the full moon and heartstrings, don't blame me for being cruel." Tan Taiyu was happy when he heard that, and then he felt great pressure. In fact, he was not sure whether the man really had the full moon and heartstrings, But now, he could only gamble. I know the direction, but, Tan Taiyu said and glanced at the people of the Hahuan sect. Hua Rui immediately trembled and retreated to the edge. He said respectfully, "If hierarchy is willing to let me go today, the people of the Hahuan sect will never step into Yunjing City in the future." What answered him was a horrible palm. Bang! Hua Rui looked up and spat blood. He was beaten dozens of feet away, but Hua Rui didn't know who did it. At this moment, his heart was trembling. He couldn't wait to go back to the headquarters of the Hahuan sect immediately. The Yinma cult couldn't be defeated. I never believe in the sweet words of the Hahuan sect. Ling Li's eyes were dull and cold. Qi Xianqing couldn't help but tremble. How many people did he kill to condense such a horrible killing intent? Go away. Today time is tight. I will let you go. If you are still in Yunjing City when I come back, don't blame me for not giving face to hierarchy Tian. Yes. Hua Rui got up quickly and immediately left with his servants. He wished that his parents could give him 2 more legs. Chu Lu managed to keep up with them, but she was worried in her heart. If she left like this, the people of the Hongyan house would suffer. How could she explain it to Mr. Li? Seeing the people of the Hahuan sect escape, Tan Taiyu was surprised. It seemed that the notorious child Li in the martial arts circle was not as bloodthirsty as imagined. But he soon attributed the reason to the time. Tan Taiyu closed his eyes to contact the machine-operated eagle. When he saw the picture from the machine-operated eagle, he immediately said, "There is a beautiful building in the south of the city. The people of the Lianshi cult are hiding there. The waterside pavilion in the south of the city." He reached out and grabbed Tan Taiyu's shoulder. Then he rushed out like lightning. Ling Mo grabbed Qi Xianqing behind him. Everyone immediately followed. Whoosh! The strong wind blew on his face. Tan Taiyu's hair stood up and he couldn't open his eyes. But he still saw the hand that grabbed his shoulder. It was white and slender. It was like the hand of a teenager. This was an impression in his mind. Tan Taiyu was slightly shocked. Wasn't the hierarch of the Yinma cult an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years and his cultivation was unknown? Had he returned to his youth and stepped into an unknown realm? Tan Taiyu was terrified and didn't dare to guess again. But he didn't know that Ling Li also had difficulties at this moment. If the plan didn't go wrong and the time was tight, he couldn't directly expose himself to find the full moon and heartstrings. The Dongfang family must be observing in the dark. Ling Li's eyes flashed with cold light. Only by killing them could the secret of the Yinma cult be kept. The legend known by the world was not false. The original hierarch of the Yinma cult was indeed an old monster who had lived for more than 300 years. Ling Li didn't know why the old monster passed the position of hierarch to him before he died. Although the cult was flourishing in recent years, and those elders with terrible cultivation didn't come out to make trouble, Ling Li always felt that the situation was out of control. All of this was the uneasiness brought by the lack of strength. He knew that only when he broke through to the longevity realm and his fighting power could he become the real master of the Yinma cult. In the eyes of those old monsters, his actions might be just a small fight. If he died, the Yinma cult would be dormant and wait for the next master. Because the hierarch of the Yinma cult was dead, it was impossible for the Yinma cult to take revenge with the whole sect. At this moment, Su Li suddenly stopped in the middle of the chase. Fang Yuan, Yun Yi and others were all confused and asked. Su Li shook her head. She sensed that the person with the full moon and heartstrings was in the waterside pavilion in the south of the city. His breath was vague and dormant. He was waiting for other people of the Lianshi cult to gather. Then it was not urgent. Su Li suddenly turned around and looked into the distance behind her. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Someone is coming. After a few seconds, Fang Yuan and others sensed it and were not nervous. Yun Yi and others were nervous. Although they were all inborn seniors, none of them was at the peak of the inborn realm. If they met any of the 4 forces who had bid before, they would die miserably. As this thought flashed through Yun Yi's mind, he widened his eyes and looked over. He saw a person wearing a jade bone mask and holding a pale young man in his hand. Jade bone mask. Child Li of the Yinma cult. It was over. Yun Yi almost fainted. What he was afraid of really happened, and the most powerful one came. Although they were frightened, Yun Yi and others subconsciously stood in front of Su Li. Fang Yuan and others were amused and moved. Ling Li stopped when the wind swept by. His clothes were fluttering. Ling Mo, Ling Qinglan and others came behind him. When he saw the young man in cyan with a bamboo hat, he was slightly stunned. He came here with the help of Tan Taiyu. Mr. Li was more well-informed than him. When Ling Qinglan and others saw Su Li, their tense faces eased and they all held their fists. Such a reaction instantly caused Yun Yi to be extremely shocked. Chapter 228. Ling Li was concerned about the full moon and heartstrings. He confronted Su Li for a moment and finally couldn't help but break the silence. Didn't you say that you would run the winery honestly and don't care about external affairs? Are you also interested in the full moon and heartstrings? Master? Which one? Yun Yi and others were confused. Who among them could make the hierarch of the Inma cult so afraid? Ha! Su Li gave a clear laugh under the bamboo hat. Hierarch, you are wrong. It's rare for a treasure like the full moon and heartstrings to appear in the secular world. If I don't come to see it, wouldn't my life be too boring? Ling Li was silent for a moment and said slowly, Mr. Li, the full moon and heartstrings is very useful to me. If you just want to see what the full moon and heartstrings looks like, I can lend it to you for 3 days after I get it. Please don't do anything this time. I owe you a favor. Looking at Su Li, who suddenly changed her voice, Yun Yi and others were completely dumbfounded. The miss was the mysterious Mr. Li with a frightening background. Yun Yi and others were all stunned. They didn't dare to look back at Su Li. What they saw today was like a dream. It seemed so unreal. One was a weak princess who was born in the folk and had ordinary skills. The other was Mr. Li, who had excellent skills and martial arts. These two people were actually the same person? Yun Yi and others were shocked. Su Li narrowed her eyes and secretly transmitted the sound to Wen Tingshan. She said, I certainly know the purpose of your cult to get the full moon and heartstrings, but Ling Li thought of the relationship between Mr. Li and Su Li and felt uncomfortable. But when he heard that Mr. Li meant to retreat, he was a little relieved. But what? To be honest, Ling Li didn't have absolute confidence to win against Mr. Li. Although Mr. Li didn't do anything since he appeared, he always felt that he was very dangerous. It seemed that there was an extremely dangerous force in his body, which made Ling Li afraid. Just when Ling Li finished his words, Su Li suddenly narrowed her eyes and secretly transmitted the sound to Wen Tingshan. Don't wait. Do it. Bang, 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 bang. A terrible pneuma like a tsunami suddenly appeared. Ling Li's expression changed instantly. Ling Qinglan threw out his folding fan without saying anything. It turned into a protective tactical matrix and covered everyone in it. After this step, several black shadows fell from the sky like dumplings. They fell onto the protective barrier of the town and rolled to the ground, unable to move. This, seeing that more than a dozen people in black suddenly appeared in the field, except for Su Li and the people of the Lin Li building who knew about it, everyone else was stunned. A very light gray shadow flashed, and Wen Tingshan appeared in front of Su Li. Yuni and others were so scared that their hearts almost stopped and their blood coagulated. Where did this terrifying figure come from? They didn't even notice how this person appeared. Only Ling Li saw the movement of this person. He also came down from above and finally stood in front of Su Li. In that case, Ling Li seemed to think of something. He looked at the man in black who couldn't move on the ground and narrowed his eyes slowly. When Tingshan pretended to salute to Su Li and secretly transmitted the sound, one of them is in the half-step to the longevity realm. I have marked him. I see. You go to the waterside pavilion in the south of the city first. Don't let the people of the Lianshi cult escape. When Tingshan nodded and disappeared in front of everyone. When Tingshan left, but the atmosphere in the field was not relaxed. Ling Yamo and others were really shocked. But Ling Qinglan remembered that this person was the senior he saw in the Lin Li building last time. A senior in the longevity realm. Ling Li waved his hand to let Ling Qinglan withdraw the protective tactical matrix. He walked to the man in black who lay on the ground motionless. He squatted down and reached out to remove the mask on his face, revealing his face. He didn't know this person, but he could guess the identity of this person. The middle-aged man in black was stiff and could only move his eyes. He looked at the jade bone mask and the bamboo hat and cyan clothes not far away. He was frightened. They were sent by Dongfang Xiao to inquire about information. Naturally, they were extraordinary. In terms of hiding ability, even a senior in the longevity realm couldn't compare with them. Moreover, he himself had already stepped into the longevity realm. Even a senior in the longevity realm with high strength couldn't necessarily find him. But this time, he didn't see the figure at all. He only felt that it was dark in front of him. Then his cultivation was restrained and he was thrown down from the tree in the sky. It was horrible. There was such a horrible person in the Linli building. This matter must be reported to the head of the family. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man in black was full of bitterness. He had become a fish on the chopping board. It was unknown whether he could go back alive. I don't like people eavesdropping when I talk in my life. Su Li walked slowly and said in a light tone. But the middle-aged man in black heard it very coldly. Tell me, you little mice, who are hiding in the dark. Which force do you come from? What do you want? The middle-aged man in black was so angry that he twisted his mouth. This person knew that his tendons and vessels were sealed and he couldn't speak or transmit the sound, but he still asked him like this. Ling Li stood up and saluted to Su Li. He said in a low voice with some sincerity, "Thank you very much." Needless to say, with Mr. Li's wisdom, he must understand why he thanked him. Su Li nodded slightly and transmitted the sound, "Hierarch Ling, this group of people must be troublesome for you. Why don't you let me deal with them?" Ling Li frowned slightly and transmitted the sound, "It is impossible that you don't know their origin." Su Li smiled indifferently, "I just asked them about their origin. Since they didn't tell me, how could I know? In this case, those who rashly disturb my peace will naturally be dealt with by me." Hearing such a fallacy, Ling Li couldn't find a way to refute. He smiled bitterly and transmitted the sound back. "They were found by you, so naturally, you can deal with them. We, the Inma cult, will not intervene in this matter." Su Li nodded and ordered someone to find a carriage. She threw the people of the Dongfang family into the carriage and transported them back to the Linli building. The auction fair was a grand event. For forces came here. The Dongfang family would definitely observe secretly and be a bystander. Neither the Linli building nor the Inma cult should be exposed. So, she had already asked Wen Tingshan to look for traces of the Dongfang family around. As expected, most of the spies of the Dongfang family followed Ling Li. This time, Ling Li's action was really full of loopholes. According to his previous actions, it shouldn't be like this. Su Li had doubts in her heart, but she couldn't ask directly. She could only take people with Ling Li to the waterside pavilion in the south of the city. In a stable of the waterside pavilion, the fourth elder of the Lianshi cult hid in the dark. He restrained his pneuma and quietly waited for the arrival of other people of the Lianshi cult. This was the place agreed by Tao Zixing. The third prince also arranged the waterside pavilion and temporarily withdrew the servants. Elder Tao changed the plan temporarily. As expected, no one followed him here. The full moon and heartstrings belonged to the Lianshi cult. The fourth elder's triangular eyes flashed with excitement. He took out the glass bottle from his bosom and carefully examined it. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly. He approached the glass bottle and sniffed it carefully. It was a very light fragrance. If it wasn't for the fact that he was huddled in a corner and looking at it, he wouldn't have noticed it at all. The glaze bottle was tampered with. There was only one word left in the fourth elder's heart. He stood up and rushed out without saying a word. Suddenly, he blacked out and fell to the ground. The glazed bottle also fell to the ground and rolled to a person's feet. Wen Tingshan picked up the glazed bottle and handed it to Su Li silently. In the night, Ling Li could see that there was no fluctuation in his eyes. What a loyal subordinate! Ling Li praised secretly. His psychic awareness swept outside the waterside pavilion from time to time. According to Su Li's proposal, only Su Li, Ling Li and Wen Tingshan entered the waterside pavilion. Although Ling Li was afraid to face such a horrible person like Wen Tingshan, he still chose to believe Su Li because of the previous spy of the Dongfang family. Su Li shook the glaze bottle and chuckled. Then she took out an identical elixir and glaze bottle from her arms and put them into the arms of the fourth elder. Wen Tingshan was surprised. Ling Li was even more surprised. But it was covered by the mask, so he didn't show it. Now he finally understood why Su Li didn't let a large number of people in. It turned out that she had a plan. Su Li threw the glaze bottle to Ling Li without saying anything. Ling Li put it away in a hurry. There was a hidden bitterness in his eyes. If it was broken, how could he explain it to Su Li? This elder of the Lianshi cult has practiced for many years. Isn't it a waste to die like this? Su Li opened the mouth of the fourth elder and gave him a bottle of medicine. Ling Li couldn't help but ask in confusion, "What did you give him?" When Tingshan snorted coldly, "Hierarchling, don't ask too much." He didn't have a good impression of the Yinma cult. When the Yinma cult was still in the spiritual circle, the One Swords Mountain and the Yinma cult were incompatible. One was a decent example, the other was a devil. Later, the Yinma cult withdrew from the spiritual circle, so the hostility was eased a lot. Ling Li suddenly felt cold all over, as if he was stared at by a beast. His eyes flashed with coldness. Before he refuted, he heard Su Li's slightly reprimanding voice. "Protector Shan, Hierarchling is a distinguished guest of the Lin Li building. Don't be rude." When Tingshan narrowed his eyes, Ling Li felt cold all over. He even had the illusion that he would fight in the next breath. But in the end, he just snorted coldly and turned his head. Ling Li breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't understand why the subordinates of the Lin Li building were hostile to him, but he couldn't ask directly. "Let's go." A hand gently patted him on the shoulder. Ling Li came to his sense. He glanced at Wen Tingshan, who followed Su Li honestly and followed them. In the middle of the night, the cold wind blew. The war in Yunjing City hadn't been extinguished yet. Shouts could be heard everywhere. The two people who really got the full moon and heartstrings were idle at this moment. Su Li and Ling Li repulsed the subordinates of the two sides respectively. They strolled in the forest and talked alone. "Aren't you curious about what I gave him to drink? That's my unique poison. He won't remember that he was beaten or that the glass bottle was tampered with. He will only remember that he slept in the waterside pavilion in the south of the city." Su Li suddenly said. Ling Li's scalp was numb. His suspicion was true. Chapter 229. But Qi Xianqing only knew medicine, and he was not proficient in poison, Ling Li thought. At this time, Su Li, who was walking in front of him, suddenly stopped. He looked up and found that they were outside Yunjing City. "Hierarchling, see you later." Su Li simply left without any hesitation. Ling Li could only sigh and continue to hide his doubts in his heart. In the headquarters of Yinma cult, Qi Xianqing sat on the precious pearwood chair. He was expressionless, but his heart was trembling. One day, he could come to the legendary headquarters of the Yinma cult. Although his cultivation was blocked and his eyes were blindfolded, he didn't know where it was. But he knew that it was not too far from Yunjing City. Looking at the fragrant tea in his hand, Qi Xianqing felt that it was tasteless, and there was worry in his eyes. Knowing such a secret, could he and his apprentice leave safely? Perhaps Tan Taiyu was not knowledgeable enough, or Ling Li's behavior was convincing, but he was much more open-minded than Qi Xianqing. He carried a long wooden box and looked around, but he didn't see any sign of mechanism. It was more like a slightly luxurious house than the headquarters of the Yinma cult. He wanted to go outside to have a look, but he was stopped. He had to give up helplessly. After a while, Ling Li came in with a jade bone mask. He chuckled and said, "You have been waiting for a long time. I have a few questions to ask you. If you are willing to cooperate, someone will send you away." What if he didn't answer? Qi Xianqing took a deep breath, but he didn't say what he thought. He nodded and said, "Hierarch, you are distinguished. What you say is worth 1,000 gold. I will believe you once. Ask me." Ling Li laughed in his heart. The old guy even flattered him. He was really afraid. However, based on the relationship between him and Su Li, Ling Li couldn't kill him. Thinking of this, Ling Li turned his head and looked at Tan Taiyu, who was still walking over and sitting down obediently. He said, "Mr. Qi, what is the relationship between you and Dongfang Xiao?" Qi Xianqing heard it and thought that there was such a question. The relationship between him and Dongfang Xiao had been broken, so there was no need to hide it. He immediately revealed a bitter smile and said, "I had an agreement with the Dongfang family. I taught Dongfang Xiao to be an adult, and the Dongfang family had to do something for me. It was mutually beneficial. But later, I found that Dongfang Xiao was ungrateful and didn't want to help me at all. So, I cheated them. After that, I never set foot in Yunjing City again for decades. What I said is true. If there is any deception, I will be in Yunjing City. If so, are you satisfied with my answer?" Xianqing looked at Ling Li and said. Ling Li nodded slightly and laughed in his heart. This old guy was a scoundrel. As soon as he saw that he suffered a loss, he immediately ran away. What is the relationship between Elder Qi and Tianji country? Ling Li narrowed his eyes under the mask. What the old guy said was not necessarily true. It was possible that he deliberately ignored many details. But he said what he wanted to know without missing a word, which was enough. Old Mr. Qi is really sensible. One last question. Ling Li praised. He stared at Mr. Qi and said slowly, "I heard that Mr. Qi's medical skills are unparalleled and you are the first in the martial arts circle. How do you compare with Mr. Li?" Qi Xianqing was stunned, and then he shook his head with a wry smile and said, "Hierarch, you've stumped me. I just arrived in Yunjing City. Today, I heard Mr. Li's name at the auction fair. Then I saw him for the first time. I don't know his medical skills. How can I know who is better between me and him?" Li Yunhong said. "Are you serious?" Ling Li raised his eyebrows slightly and confirmed again. Qi Xianqing looked solemn and nodded. He was full of confidence. "Everything I said is true. I dare not lie. If you know Mr. Li's address, you can go with me to confront him face to face." "Forget it, I believe you." Ling Li shook his head. With the mysterious senior of the longevity realm, how could he go to Mr. Li's territory rashly? Moreover, Qi Xianqing's reaction was very natural when he saw Mr. Li or now. He didn't seem to be lying. After sending away Qi Xianqing and Tan Taiyu, Ling Li was lost in thought. Since it was not Qi Xianqing, he had every reason to suspect that Su Li's poison skill was taught by Mr. Li. And he heard from Su Li's early experience that she named herself. Now it seemed that it was Mr. Li who gave her the name. Was the relationship between them so close? When Ling Li thought of this, he was angry. It seemed that he was suffocated in his heart. He was very uncomfortable. "Lingamo, Master, I'm here." Lingamo, dressed in black and gold, came in the door. He looked calm and said, "Everything is ready. I'll do it myself. I'll do it now." Seeing Ling Li go out without looking back, Lingamo was inexplicable. Did the master take the wrong medicine today? Beside the official road outside the city, Ling Liui was hiding in the bushes. The expression on his face was almost the same as that of Lingamo. He was cold-blooded and ruthless. Suddenly, there was a sound behind him. He suddenly looked back and saw Lingamo. He was scared and said exaggeratedly, "Eldest brother, you didn't make a sound when you walked. I was almost scared out of my wits. You pay for it." The subordinates around wanted to laugh but dared not. Ling Liui was one of the deputy heads of the Shalu cult. Although he joined the force late, he was born to be a killer. He was promoted very quickly. He admired Ling Mo most. He liked to imitate Ling Mo's words and deeds when he had nothing to do. But he couldn't keep a straight face. It was easy to expose his cheerful temperament. Except for killing, he was very confused at other times. This was deeply liked by his subordinates. Ling Mo twitched his mouth and stepped aside. When Ling Liui saw the jade bone mask, he was so scared that he almost bit his tongue. He said with a sad face, "Hi, child." Seeing Ling Liui, Ling Li was a little less upset. He immediately smiled and said, "Liui, you still like to joke as before. You haven't changed at all. Do you still remember the rules of the cult?" Ling Liui drooped his head. At other times, it was okay for him to stand on Ling Mo's head and make trouble. But now he was performing a task. He couldn't laugh and make trouble. Otherwise, he would be punished. It's good that you remember. Remember to take the punishment later. Yes. Ling Liui responded weakly. Suddenly, the smile on Ling Li's face faded. Ling Liui's ears moved. He lowered his body and looked out. Then he quickly recovered his calm face and forgot all the punishment. On the dark official road, a group of people appeared in the distance. It was Wei Yuran and Wei Zhenjin who walked in the front. They finally came. Chapter 230. At this moment, Wei Yuran looked at Yunjing City, which was like a huge monster lurking in the dark, with the mighty seniors of the Wei family. He looked terrible. This time he came to Dahan country, he underestimated the attraction of the full moon and heartstrings and the people in the world. The people of the Lianshi cult were scattered all the way. The more he chased them, the more they were scattered. All he caught were some useless corpse puppets. In addition, various forces fought and harassed him on the way. In the end, he even lost Tao Zisong's team. That was not the most embarrassing thing. The most annoying thing was that when he just reorganized his men to determine the direction of Tao Zisong and others' escape, the spy actually came to report that the full moon and heartstrings was not with Tao Zisong. It was sent to a safe place by another elder. The spy also said that a large number of people of the Inma cult chased them outside the city. Wei Yuran, who had been holding his breath, was so angry that he couldn't bear it anymore. Regardless of the advice of the elders of the Wei family, he directly led his men back, hoping to catch up with the Inma cult. Although the elders of the Wei family felt that it was quite inappropriate to fight against the Inma cult, they couldn't boost the morale of the Inma cult. Anyway, they were seniors of the inborn ninth hurdle. Even if they couldn't defeat the Inma cult, it should not be a problem for them to escape with the second master and the Mississippi. Therefore, there was the scene on the official road. Second master, don't be too anxious. The news just came. We can catch up if we rush there now. The 10th elder of the Wei family spoke. He was also the one with the highest cultivation. He was at the peak of the inborn realm. He used the poisonous insect perfectly. Wei Yuran was the most outstanding prince in the royal family of the Wei family. He was expected to be the new emperor of Nanjiang country in the future. His attitude was very modest. Suddenly, the 10th elder smelled a strange fragrance. Even he felt a little dizzy. His expression immediately changed and he shouted, "Everyone, hold your breath." The 10th elder's voice was still a little slow. When he spoke, several people fell to the ground. The 10th elder snorted coldly and waved his sleeves to disperse the fragrance around him. Wei Yuran and Wei Zhenjin were always under the protection of the 10th elder. They took a breath proudly and took out the detoxification pill to swallow. Then they became sober. Before Wei Yuran could figure out what was going on, several sword and sword rays lit up in the darkness. A few warriors at Xiantian Realm Level 1 were caught off guard and were sliced in half from top to bottom. The smell of blood filled the air. Wei Yuran was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He shouted, "Defend!" Those who could stand here were all experienced. As soon as Wei Yuran finished his words, the defensive tactical matrix was about to be formed. But this was a killing trap carefully arranged by Ling Li. How could it let the Wei family take a breather? Ling Liui's face under the mask was full of killing intent. He aimed at several key formation eyes, and the saber light in his hand shone brightly. Several heads fell to the ground and blood gushed out. The defensive formations suddenly collapsed. Bastard die! When 10th elder saw Ling Liui, he was furious. He madly ran his vigorous jinqi and raised his palm to attack Ling Liui. Ling Liui smoothly dodged the attack and jumped in the crowd. Unexpectedly, he disappeared from people's sight. Even the soul sense could not detect him for a while. Damn it! Blue veins popped on the 10th elder's forehead. His nerves were taut, and his spiritual sense constantly swept around. How could he not see such a strange hiding method? The people who attacked them were all killers who were proficient in assassination methods. At this moment, A scream of horror suddenly came from behind 10th Elder. It was the 6th Mississippi. Oh no. His face suddenly changed, and he immediately turned back to defend, regardless of the fact that several disciples of the Wei family were killed. But it was still too late. A sharp dagger penetrated Wei Yuren's chest from the back to the chest and cut off the heart vein. A lot of blood gushed out of Wei Yuren's mouth. It seemed that he could not survive. "Master!" 10th Elder cried desperately and rushed to Wei Yuren. He took over Wei Yuren's fallen body and only saw a pair of chilling eyes slowly disappear in the darkness. It was an extremely brilliant assassination skill, but he did not notice it at all. Second brother, don't scare me." Wei Zhenjin's face was covered with Wei Yuren's blood. She was no longer barbaric and charming. Her beautiful eyes were full of panic. She grasped Wei Yuren's hands tightly and burst into tears. She said, "Second brother, you will be fine. We will go back and invite the best doctor. You must hold on." Wei Yuren could not speak at this moment. He held his breath and stared at Wei Yuren. Then he grabbed Wei Zhenjin's wrist and pulled her to him. Wei Zhenjin immediately understood. She leaned over and listened carefully. Finally, she heard intermittent sounds. But melting skill, revenge, refining. Before he finished his words, Wei Zhenjin could not hear anything else. Wei Yuren's hands had been loosened. "Second brother!" Wei Zhenjin's shrill cry echoed in the air. She lay on Wei Yuren's chest and did not want to raise her head. She remembered that in Nanjiang country, the emperor told her the news of the full moon and heartstrings. She pestered the second brother to take her to the Dahan country to participate in the auction. The second brother did not say anything and went to the emperor to ask for permission to set foot in a dangerous place. She was very happy and looked forward to a foreign country. But now, she hoped that she did not get the news and did not beg the second brother to come with her. It would be great if all this was fake. "Sixth Miss, we have to leave quickly. It is hard to guard against killers. The second master has been killed. You have to cheer up." 10th Elder sighed. Wei Zhenjin slowly raised her head and revealed a pair of red and swollen eyes. They seemed to be stained with blood and were full of hatred. "Well, let's go back immediately. We can't let the second brother's soul find the way home." Wei Zhenjin's tears had not dried up. She held Wei Yuren who had died. She stood up expressionlessly and looked down at Wei Yuren who seemed to be sleeping quietly in her arms. She said softly, "Second brother, I won't let you die with everlasting regret." After making up his mind, 10th Elder immediately took people to leave. Later, Ling Mo attacked several times. He pretended that the assassination failed and escaped thousands of miles away. 10th Elder was extremely angry, but he was afraid that it was a trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain. So, he did not dare to leave Wei Zhenjin. The sky gradually lit up. The darkness faded and the traces of killers also disappeared. 10th Elder breathed a sigh of relief. Without the harassment of killers, he immediately sped up and returned to the country. When they came, there were hundreds of people, but when they left, there were only 20 or 30 people left. It could be said that they suffered a heavy loss. At this moment, in the barren mountain hundreds of miles north of Yunjing City, the battle between Tao Zisong and the Hahuan sect also came to an end. Hua Rei grabbed the double daggers backhandedly, half-squatting, and looked at the elders of the Lianshi cult who also stopped opposite with gloomy eyes. Maybe God played a joke on the Hahuan sect. The route Hua Rei took people to escape happened to run into Tao Zisong and others. Then he saw that Tao Zisong's eyes suddenly became blood red. Without saying a word, he fought with people of the Hahuan sect. Several people of the Hahuan sect died immediately. Hua Rui immediately got angry and started to fight back. Then, the two sides fought inexplicably. After a night, both sides fought with blood like a river. Hua Rui fought with 4 grand elders alone and pulled the one-sided battle into a stalemate. But he also paid the price of being seriously injured and exhausted. At this moment, although the Lianshi cult was deterred and did not dare to go forward, he knew his pain. "Chu Lu, what the hell is going on? Why is the Lianshi cult the enemy of the Hahuan sect?" Hua Rui had time to question Chu Lu. Chu Lu trembled like a frightened deer. Of course, She knew it was the result of Mr. Li's plan. But if she said it, she would die immediately. Maybe it was because her cultivation was too low that people of the Lianshi cult didn't take her seriously. Many seniors of the inborn realm died, but she was still alive. She took a deep breath and transmitted the sound, "Deputy Hierarch, it's like this." On a rainy night in the Wu family, Elder Dao was also attacked by the Lianshi cult and lost an arm. Chu Lu's tone was not accurate, but it was more convincing to Hua Rui. Elder Dao and the Lianshi cult had a grudge against each other, but he was the scapegoat. It was ridiculous. "Elder Tao, if you have resentment in your heart, you can go to the old guy, Dao Kong. Why do you make life difficult for me?" Hua Rui's words were equivalent to admitting that it was the Hehuan sect that attacked on that rainy night. Tao Zisong remembered that the people who died on that day were all his subordinates who had followed him for more than 10 years. He was more resentful and said gloomily, "Hua Rui, it's easy for you to say that. Since it's a grudge of life and death, how can I let you go alive? Dao Kong is a member of the Hehuan sect. I kill you to collect debts for my brothers." Hua Rui heard it and scolded Dao Kong in his heart. But he pretended to fight desperately. The 4 elders of the Lianshi cult were immediately shocked. They were alert to Hua Rui. The counterattack of a senior at the peak of the inborn realm was very horrible. As long as he was willing to give up his life, 2 people on their side would die. Hua Rui gathered momentum under his feet and became more and more horrible. No one wanted to be the 2 unlucky guys. The 4 people subconsciously retreated. But at this moment, Hua Rui fled back without saying anything. Then he disappeared in the barren mountain and rocks in the blink of an eye. The 4 people were instantly dumbfounded. They didn't expect that Hua Rui was so shameless that he directly betrayed other people of the Hehuan sect. Damn it. Chase him. He is seriously injured. He can't escape. Stop right there. The 4 elders were so angry that they chased him with Tao Zisong. The remaining 4 elders of the Hehuan sect saw that the deputy hierarch escaped. They didn't care about other people's life and death. They directly turned around and ran. But before they ran a few steps, they were shot in the neck by a stone flying from the barren mountain. They fell to the ground and died. The rest people, whether from the Hehuan sect or the Lianshi cult, were all frightened. Even the person didn't show up, but he directly killed 4 warriors of the upper inborn realm. The person was absolutely extremely horrible. But under the pressure of life and death, the elders of the Lianshi cult wanted to run in the opposite direction of the stone. But this time, they were greeted by stone needles that were sharper than the stone. Ho! The elders of the Lianshi cult roared at the same time. Their ruddy faces became as gray as the stone. Their defensive power increased greatly. But the stone needles penetrated the spiritual shields of the 4 people but disappeared. They went through their heads with white brains. Plop. The corpses fell to the ground neatly. The 4 elders followed the footsteps of the Hehuan sect. But the person in the dark was not satisfied. He snorted coldly, and the stones shrouded them like flying rain. Ah 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 ah. Chapter 231. After a short scream, there was no one alive except for Chu Lu in the barren hills and rocks which were like a slaughterhouse. Chu Lu's eyes were full of dullness after the fear. She felt that there was a drop of water falling on her face. She touched her face blankly, but her hands were blood red. She couldn't help but look up. It turned out that the blood was splashed on the stone and converged into a stream. It fell down along the tip like a blood rain. "Ooh!" Chu Lu trembled and muttered to herself. She looked at the direction where the flying stone was shot. She had already guessed who did it, but she couldn't help but ask. Fang Yuan's lonely figure walked out of the forest. A ray of sunshine shone on his face, which covered up his paleness. It was not easy for him to use the AO sword skills on a large scale. His strength was not strong enough. Looking at the direction where the stone needles flew out, Fang Yuan's eyes flashed a touch of warmth. He walked to Chu Lu, who was absent-minded, and said indifferently, "Thank you for this period of time. The Linli building has fulfilled half of the promise. Go back to the Linli building with me. After Mr. Li detoxifies you, you will be free." Hearing that, Chu Lu couldn't help but tremble. She was scared and excited. Finally, she seemed to collapse. She squatted down and cried. She was afraid of the cruel means of the Linli building. A young warrior like Fang Yuan was indifferent when he killed people. It seemed that what he killed was not people, but melons and vegetables. From Fang Yuan's face, she seemed to see the mountains of corpses and seas of blood behind the Linli building. It was as frightening as the Hehuan sect. She was excited because although the Linli building was an evil force like the Hehuan sect, it was more trustworthy than the Hehuan sect. It really helped her to wipe out the forces of the Hehuan sect in Yunjing and invited her to stay in the Linli building to detoxify. Such a polite invitation made her realize that she was still a person who could be respected. When Chu Lu was crying, Chu Qingning and Fang Mu came together, holding the heads of the other 4 elders of the Lianshi cult in their hands. At this moment, the 2 of them were a little upset. They made a sneak attack just now, but they almost let them escape. If Su Li didn't help them secretly, their plan would fail. What's the situation? Fang Yuan took the head and put all the corpses together to destroy the corpses and asked. Chu Qingning said with a smile. Hua Rui ran in a funny way. He thought that he had escaped from the eyes and ears of the 4 people. Now he is on the way back. Big brother, let me help. Fang Mu diligently moved the corpse and poured the powder to remove the blood. Fang Yuan nodded and said nothing. Chu Lu saw the 4 heads and the 3 people's actions of destroying the corpses. She was shocked and gradually stopped crying. She had always been smart. At this moment, how could she figure out the intention of Fang Yuan and others? Sigh. Chu Lu suddenly sympathized with the Hehuan sect and the Lianshi cult. They were both 9th grade sects and minded their own business. However, Mr. Li made things difficult for them and they became mortal enemies. It could be imagined that when Hua Rui returned to the sect and told Yi Tian the news of the annihilation of the Lianshi cult, the conflict between the Hehuan sect and the Lianshi cult would inevitably be irreconcilable. 1 hour later, Chu Lu, who had become an ordinary woman, followed Fang Yuan and others back to the Linli building. Yin Xuetong had already arranged for her and took her to the room on the 4th floor. Chu Lu sat on the bed and looked around at the layout of the room. Different from the colorful colors of the Hongyan house, the color here was cyan. It exuded a simple and elegant atmosphere, as if there was a breeze blowing on the face, which made people feel comfortable. This was not the first time that she came to the Linli building, but only this time made her feel at ease. Because she finally didn't need to be a pawn of the Hehuan sect. After the Hongshan powder was removed, she could inquire about the whereabouts of her brother. Miss Chu, Mr. Li asked you to go to the attic on the top floor to find him. Fang Mu's voice sounded outside the door. Chu Lu had seen him before. He was a young man less than 20 years old. He looked very shy. But after today's experience, she no longer dared to look down on anyone in the Linli building. I see. I'm coming. Chu Lu had no clothes to change now. She could only take off the coat stained with a lot of blood. She tidied her hair and opened the door. But she saw Fang Ling. Sister Chu, where are you going? I bring you clean clothes. There is a bathhouse on the 1st floor. There is no one there. You can take a bath. Looking at Fang Ling's clean eyes, Chu Lu smiled uncomfortably and said, Mr. Li asked me to go there. Fang Ling suddenly understood. She held the clothes and walked into the room. She said, Then I will put the clothes in your room. You can change them when you come back. Putting down the clothes, Fang Ling skipped away. Chu Lu couldn't help but wonder why the servants here didn't seem to be in awe of Mr. Li. Well, it has nothing to do with me in the future. Chu Lu shook her head and went upstairs. She pushed the door open and saw a young man in cyan sitting by the window reading. She subconsciously looked uncomfortable. She walked to Su Li with light steps and said respectfully, Mr. Li, are you looking for me? Seeing Chu Lu's attitude, Su Li's eyes flashed. She smiled and said, Miss Chu, we just cooperate. Now the cooperation is over. Don't be so formal. Yes, Mr. Li. Chu Lu nodded and smiled bitterly in her heart. Now the name, Mr. Li, was not as unknown as before. He was a famous and unfathomable big shot in the capital. She had seen the cruel means of the Linli building. How could she be at ease at this moment? Su Li smiled slightly and pushed a glass of wine to Chu Lu. After drinking 3 glasses, Chu Lu gradually relaxed. She found that Mr. Li was very kind and easy to get along with. What's your plan after detoxification? Su Li put down the wine glass and asked innocently. Chu Lu thought of the little things in these years. She felt bitter in her heart. Facing Su Li, she had the idea of spitting it out. Su Li was a very suitable person to talk to. With Mr. Li's vision, he might be able to help her. But it might be Mr. Li's trap to make her fall into entanglement again. Chu Lu was silent and didn't answer for a long time. Su Li was not in a hurry. She drank slowly and waited. She was very clear about Chu Lu's wisdom. Otherwise, she wouldn't have survived from the harsh conditions of the Hahuan sect until today. After a quarter of an hour, Chu Lu's sad eyes became clear again. She smiled at Su Li and pleaded, "What can I do? I will not return for 10 years. Now things are the same, but people have changed. I just want to find my only relative. I don't have the face to see him. If I can see him from afar, I will die without regret. Mr. Li, are you willing to help me?" Chapter 232. Chu Lu lowered her head and said without hesitation, "I have been under the control of the Hahuan sect for 10 years. Now, except for the Hongyan house, there is no other valuable thing. If you want, I am willing to cooperate and hand over the intelligence system of the Hongyan house to you." Su Li was waiting for her words. She nodded slightly and said, "You and Yin Xuetong can handle it. In return, I can help you to inquire about the whereabouts of your brother." Chu Lu nodded gently and smiled with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Li." In fact, she was afraid that Mr. Li would force her to stay like the Hahuan sect. Fortunately, he didn't mention it. Now that she could find out the whereabouts of her brother at the Hongyan house, it was the best result. She also thought that after the Hahuan sect retreated, she could control the intelligence system of the Hongyan house by herself. But an intelligence system without strength was like building an attic on a pile of sand. It couldn't stand up at all. She was afraid that the Hongyan house would be destroyed by the people of the Yinma cult on the second day after she took control. Such an unrealistic idea only flashed in her mind once and was rejected by her. Su Li nodded and asked Chu Lu to leave. She had thought of letting Chu Lu stay, but Chu Lu obviously had a shadow about the power of the Hahuan sect. She was eager to be free. It was not appropriate to talk with her now. It was not too late to ask Chu Lu's opinion after she accepted the Hongyan house. Chu Lu stood up and saluted. She turned around and was about to leave. Suddenly, she stopped and turned back. She said, "I have been separated from my brother for more than 10 years. You are still young. I am afraid that you don't know. But you are always experienced and knowledgeable. I still want to ask one more question." Su Li's eyes flashed and her tone softened. "Go ahead. I have agreed to make a deal with you. It is okay for you to ask one more question. Do you know that the Yi family was destroyed 14 years ago?" Chu Lu's words shocked Su Li slightly. She subconsciously thought of Ling Qinglan. Chu Lu's eyes were slightly moist. She said to herself, "I used to be the adopted daughter of the Yi family. That year, I went to other places to find my biological parents under the care of the guards of the Yi family. When I came back, I found that the Yi family was destroyed. I asked around and only heard that my brother was still alive. But before I had time to find him, he was captured by the Hahuan sect." "What is your brother's name?" Su Li's eyes were shining. Chu Lu's expression changed. She gritted her teeth and said, "My real name is Yi Shui. My brother is the eldest son of the Yi family. My brother is the eldest son of the Yima." Su Li thought for a moment, but she didn't tell Chu Lu the clue. If Ling Qinglan was not EMO, wouldn't she make Chu Lu happy in vain? "I see. I will ask people of the Linli building to inquire about it. Just wait for the news." Hearing that, Chu Lu was disappointed, but she cheered up soon. She had been looking for her brother secretly for 10 years, but there was no news. It would be strange if Mr. Li really knew it. However, in her heart, Mr. Li had always been resourceful. Maybe there would be news soon. She had waited for so many years. She would soon be free from the Hongshan powder. She could wait for another 10 years. After Chu Lu left, Yin Xuetong knocked on the door excitedly with the account book. He said, "Su Li, since we auctioned the bottle of Liehua spirits at the auction house, the orders have increased sharply. We made 80 million taels this morning." Under the operation of the machine, there was a large amount of raw Liehua spirits in the cellar. But Yin Xuetong learned from Su Li in business. He told the businessmen that it was extremely difficult to brew the raw Liehua spirits, and only 8 jars could be brewed in 3 months. In this way, all the businessmen immediately rushed to bid. Finally, the price was 10 million taels, which was not much lower than the price at the auction house. Su Li saw Yin Xuetong's eyes were shining like a miser. She couldn't help but laugh. She said, "Silver is only useful in the secular world. Chu Lu has promised to give us the intelligence of the Hongyan house. You can take the money to reorganize the intelligence system. It is more than enough." Yin Xuetong was slightly startled when she heard this, and then nodded solemnly. The intelligence system of a force was equivalent to the eyes of this force, and it was a very important institutional composition. Although the intelligence system of the Red Rouge House was very perfect, the people inside needed to be replaced, and naturally needed a lot of money to operate. It turned out that Su Li auctioned the Liehua spirits for this purpose. Yin Xuetong was enlightened. She secretly stuck out her tongue. Su Li's plan was closely linked and precise. She deserved to be the amazing woman she admired. By the way, what happened to the people of the Dongfang family? Su Li rubbed her eyebrows and suddenly asked. Yin Xuetong was a little strange. She nodded and replied, "They all woke up and left before dawn." What did you do to them?" She clearly remembered that before the group of people was locked in the addendum, they would rather die than surrender. They were all loyal guards of the Dongfang family. But less than an hour after Su Li went in, the attitude of the group of people changed completely. Their eyes were full of fanatical belief. They even called her Protector Yin when they saw her. Su Li's means were really terrible. Su Li took a sip of the wine and supported half of her cheek with her right hand. She looked indifferent. "I didn't do anything. I just changed something a little bit." Yin Xuetong didn't understand. This matter involved Su Li's means, so she didn't dare to ask more. She could only go to work. At this moment, the Yinma cult, who had already returned home, also received the news that the people of the Dongfang family had left the Linli building safely. He frowned and muttered to himself, "Mr. Li, what do you want to do?" Ling Qinglan looked at the bright light in the sky, and there was doubt in his eyes. But he always believed in Mr. Li. "Mr. Li has been showing kindness to us all the time. I believe that he must have his intention to do this time. But we lack information and can't understand it." There is another news. Ling Mo walked into the yard from outside. He looked tired, but his eyes were shining. He said, "The Hahuan sect and the Lianshi cult fought on the barren mountain in the north of the city. Both sides were injured. Only Hua Rei escaped. The others didn't kill each other, but were killed by an unknown force. The scene was cleaned up, and no corpses were found." Ling Li and Ling Qinglan were both shocked. Ling Li rubbed his chin, and there was an evil smile on his face, which was very inconsistent with his playboy dress. He said, "It seems that when we were dealing with the Wei family, the Linli building was not idle. In the entire Yunjing city, only the Dongfang family and the Linli building had the ability to do this except for the Yinma cult. The people sent by the Dongfang family were all arrested by the Linli building. There was no need to guess who did this. Mr. Li, you have good means." Ling Qinglan figured out the reason, and his eyes were shining. He said, "In this way, there will be a chaotic battle between the Hahuan sect, the Lianshi cult, and the Wei family of the Nanjiang country. Although they have suffered heavy losses in the auction fair, there must be someone who can't bear it. As long as one person takes action, things will be easy." When Ling Li said this, his eyes fell on Ling Mo. Ling Mo twitched his mouth and nodded expressionlessly. He said, "Master, I know what to do." Ling Qinglan chuckled and said, "You are the head of the Shuelo cult. This kind of shameful dirty work naturally falls on you." Then, there came the evil laughter of two men in the yard. Ling Mo was depressed. He had to go out to do something soon after he returned to Yunjing City. Ling Qinglan touched his nose and looked at Ling Li with a faint smile. He said, I remember that last time you told my aunt that Ling Mo helped you collect beauties in the world and was almost spanked. What's the reason this time? How dare you mention it? Ling Li's face immediately darkened. He said, if you didn't think of such an unreliable reason to tell my mother, would I be chased and beaten all over the yard? This time just say. Ling Li scratched his head and was full of distress. Compared with dealing with his mother, he preferred to go out and fight with the head of the Lianshi cult. When he thought that Qiu Meng was going to ask the usual questions, he felt a headache. Master, just say that you like antiques recently. How about asking Ling Mo to help you inquire about it? Ling Xian, who had been silent, suddenly proposed. Ling Li's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, okay, just say this. Ling Mo, you set off immediately. Ling Mo, who was calm, couldn't help but sigh at this moment. Master also had times of fear. Everything had its vanquisher. At this moment, in the imperial garden of the imperial palace, the middle-aged man in black bowed his head and followed Dongfang Shao. He said respectfully, Master, there are many forces in this auction and I did gain a lot. The Lianshi cult was divided into 4 groups. Although they lost a lot of people, they kept the full moon and heartstrings. The person from the Hahuan sect is Huari, the deputy hierarch. He came empty-handed and is probably on the way back to the sect now. Dongfang Shao stretched out his hand to pick a wintersweet. He opened his eyes slightly and seemed to appreciate the beautiful figure of the wintersweet. He said slowly, is there any news from the Yinma cult? The middle-aged man in black said firmly. Dongfang Shao was interested. He turned around and stared at the middle-aged man. Say it. The Yinma cult is still as secretive as usual. But this time, they met with the Hahuan sect and took action. The middle-aged man in black said with pity, Child Li, who wore a jade bone mask, didn't take action. I only saw someone from the Yinma cult took action and instantly restrained a warrior at the peak of the inborn realm. His cultivation is really terrible. I was afraid that I would be exposed and couldn't come back to report the news, so I had to hide far away. Later, I didn't see anyone from the Yinma cult when I went there. It seemed that they just came to declare the sovereignty of Yunjing City. They didn't do anything radical. Dongfang He, you really cherish your life. Dongfang Shao laughed in a low voice. The middle-aged man in black immediately showed a look of fear. He hurriedly knelt down and said firmly, I dare not. I'm just afraid that I can't send the news back to the imperial palace. I'm not running away. Forget it. Get up. It's just a joke. You're scared. Dongfang Shao waved his hand and felt bored. But his eyes flashed with seriousness. Chapter 233. After that, eunuch Feng gave him elixirs. Dongfang He knelt down and thanked him profusely. He left Dongfang Shao alone in the imperial garden to meditate. Looking at the blooming plum blossoms in the yard, Dongfang Shao looked gloomy. It was said that the Yinma cult suffered a disaster and withdrew from the spiritual circle. Its power was not strong enough. All the elders had to practice in isolation because of the lack of nimbus in the secular world. He tested it with the full moon and heartstrings. He was sure that the Yinma cult despised the full moon and heartstrings, but they would definitely emphasize their domineering power. But the result was not the same as the rumor. The Wanjian sect is really deceiving me. Dongfang Shao walked back and forth with his hands behind his back. With the accumulation of the Dongfang family, they could have a place in the spiritual circle. However, the competition in the spiritual circle was too fierce. Why did the Dongfang family give up the stable life in the secular world and go to the spiritual circle to live a life in danger? This idea didn't change until the appearance of the Yinma cult. For many years he couldn't find out where the Yinma cult was hiding near Yunjing. The Yinma cult was like a hidden dragon, cultivating in his territory. If it recovered one day, the Dongfang family would be the first nourishment it devoured. He had to take action first. Dongfang Xiao had always thought about this. He maintained the balance of power in Yunjing City and constantly tested the bottom line of the Yinma cult, but he never got anything. Just a few days ago, a group of warriors who claimed to be from the Wanjian sect in the spiritual circle came and arrogantly asked him to block the city to collect the defected disciples. But at that time, the auction fair was going on in Yunjing City. If he really blocked the city, he would offend all the forces in the martial arts circle. How could he afford it? But the people of the Wanjian sect were very domineering. They finally parted on bad terms with him and disappeared. But he got the news of the Yinma cult from them. But now it seemed that the Wanjian sect was really hateful and deliberately deceived him. Fortunately, he was careful and didn't be fooled. Lord He, congratulations. Dongfang He stepped into the courtyard with a happy face. Immediately, some people congratulated him. He smiled and nodded along the way, feeling proud. Some people were jealous, but they didn't dare to show it on their faces. This was the loyalty pavilion near the eastern third house. All the loyal death guards of the Dongfang family lived here. The eastern third house was where the princes lived after they grew up. Arranging the loyalty pavilion here was also to protect the princes. After all, the bloodline of the royal family was the most important. Back to his own yard, Dongfang He put down the reward he got from the emperor and took a deep breath. There was no glory in his eyes anymore, but a sense of fear. He was born in the Dongfang family. He was the descendant of the Dongfang family servants. He had been cultivating hard all these years. When he was 70 years old, he finally stepped into the immortal level. His status rose and he was promoted to the commander of the death guards. He had almost 20 subordinates. But 70 years of deep-rooted memories told him that he actually had another identity, and that was a spy. I was the undercover of the Linli building, and so were all my subordinates. I sneaked into the Dongfang family to fight for a future for the Linli building. The Linli building was the force I was loyal to. The Dongfang family killed my parents, and I had an irreconcilable hatred. The Dongfang family was perverse and cruel. There were many spies like me, but for safety, we never contacted each other. Dongfang He's eyes were full of enthusiasm and glory. It was the greatest glory of his life to work for the Linli building. After all, even the Yinma cult was only a small part of the Linli building. How could the Dongfang family, which was a small family, compare with such a giant? In another 2 or 3 years, the Linli building would replace the Dongfang family and become the new master of the Dahan country. At that time, I would be the hero who founded the country. Dongfang He's eyes were full of expectation. He had been dormant for 70 years, and now there were only 2 or 3 years left. He would try his best to get credit in these 2 or 3 years, and fight for a reputation for himself. Mr. Li, I won't let you down. A low voice sounded in the room, and then it was silent. The elixir rewarded by Dongfang Xiao was extremely precious. He wanted to use it to break through to the longevity realm. It was really happy to use the enemy's elixir to break through and then revenge. People who came back with Dongfang He also got rewards. Without exception, they all thought that they were the undercover of the Linli building and had a great hatred with the Dongfang family. Then they practiced hard. Su Li disguised as Mr. Li and stood in front of the window of the Hongyan house. She listened to the screams behind her and looked at the imperial palace. Yes, she just made some slight adjustments to the memory of Dongfang He and others with the elixir. Most of their lives still started from the hard training in the imperial palace, but the starting point was erased by her and changed to loyalty to the Linli building. These people were trained as the death guards by the Dongfang family, and their minds were firm and unshakable. But after the memory was changed, their firm obsession became a gift for her. They were a group of the best undercover agents who didn't know how to rebel. If I had more time, a trace of pity flashed in Su Li's eyes. The elixir was a semi-finished product that she researched in her previous life. The side effect was too great. The price of taking the elixir was that their life would be shortened and they would die in 2 years at most. The cultivation of Dongfang He and others would advance by leaps and bounds in these 2 years. The elixir would make them crazy and they would burn their vitality to practice desperately. But when the elixir was exhausted, they would regain their memory and die. Well, I make the best use of them. The pity in Su Li's eyes faded, and she looked natural. She never knew what was called soft-hearted to the enemy. Mr. Li, the necessary cleaning has been completed. A person came forward and said respectfully. He looked at Su Li with the same fanaticism as Dongfang He. She was their king, the omnipotent god in their hearts. Their lives belonged to Mr. Li. Even if Mr. Li asked them to die immediately, they would do it without hesitation. Su Li waved her hand, and a gust of wind rose in front of the building, which faded the bloody smell in the room. She said, "Take the rest of the people and leave. There is no need for the Hongyan house to exist." Yes, Mr. Li. After a short time, the red light alley was on fire. The Hongyan house no longer existed. Chu Lu had been missing for several days, which became a big regret in the hearts of many childs in Yunjing City. At the same time, on the famous tea house street in Yunjing City, an old tea house for transfer was hung with a plaque. Shuerong Tea House, the middle-aged woman, who used to be the procuress of the Hongyan house, changed her face at the moment. Her dress was simple and elegant, and her smile was not coquettish anymore. No one could know that she used to be the most powerful mother in the red light alley. Chapter 234. The new year was coming. The servants of the Ling mansion were busy cleaning the whole mansion. They were all old servants of the Ling mansion. Madame Dowager and Madame Dowager treated them very well and didn't treat them as servants. They were humble, so they were grateful and loved the Ling mansion like their own home. Chiu Meng was settling accounts in the room. There were too many industries to settle at the end of the year. She was almost busy from morning to night. Suddenly, there was a creak. The door was opened. Chiu Meng bit her pen and asked without raising her head, "Mammy, what's wrong? You can handle the cleaning of the Ling residence." No one answered outside. Chiu Meng frowned slightly and stopped writing. She looked back and saw the wheelchair and the legs covered by a blanket outside the door. Li. She was slightly shocked and quickly put down the account and walked over. Ling Li sitting in the wheelchair came into her view gradually. At this moment, he was dressed neatly and didn't look like a playboy. He was full of smiles, but his eyes kept dodging. Seeing his expression, Chiu Meng suddenly became angry. She reached out to pull Ling Li's ear and said, "Boy, did you make trouble outside again?" Ling Li quickly shrank his head to avoid Chiu Meng's hand and said helplessly, "No, no. Mother, I have something to ask you this time. I have been studying in the yard these days. I didn't make trouble." "Really?" Chiu Meng stopped and didn't believe it. This boy had a lot of tricks. He always said that he didn't make trouble, but she still had to clean up for him. "Really, it's more real than gold." Ling Li covered his head with his hands like an ostrich. His voice came from his clothes. In order to maintain the image of a playboy, he almost cheated a little every 3 days and a big one every 7 days, but his mother was cheated every time. Seeing her son's strange behavior, Chiu Meng covered her mouth and laughed. The mammies who were still busy in the yard couldn't help but smile. Someone secretly thought that if the little master's legs were good, the picture would be more perfect. "Well, I'll believe you again this time." Chiu Meng walked behind Ling Li and pushed the wheelchair into the room. Ling Li was still thinking about the door and looked at it eagerly. He said, "Mother, close the door. I'm afraid that someone will eavesdrop." Chiu Meng became more curious and turned around to close the door. "Well, what do you want to tell me? Why are you so mysterious?" "It's nothing," Ling Li murmured and suddenly stuttered. Chiu Meng waited for a long time but didn't hear the words. When did this boy become so indecisive? Chiu Meng took a breath and sat down, waiting for Ling Li to pluck up the courage to speak. Since the disaster that year, Ling Li had become very rebellious. He usually avoided her and wanted to hang out with those playboys outside every day. Today, he suddenly came to talk to her alone without a servant. He must have something very important to tell her. She had to listen to it anyway. Ling Li thought. Ji Li's words. Ling Ji Li family Li eyes Ji Li. Ling Li, you have lived 2 lives and experienced more hardships than anyone else. But now, for your marriage, you can't even show such courage. Are you a man? Ling Li had been muttering for an hour. Qiumeng saw Ling Li struggling with himself. She pretended to sigh and said, Li, if you don't tell me, I have to settle the account. Ling Li suddenly woke up. He was so anxious that he blurted out the words hidden in his heart, Mother, please tell me how to please girls. Qiumeng was stunned, and then her eyes were burning. She stood up excitedly and grasped Ling Li's shoulder tightly. She said, Tell me, which girl do you like? Ling Li blushed and pointed behind Qiumeng. He wanted to change the topic. Mother, the chair fell down, don't worry about that. Tell me, who do you like? That way, I can give you some advice. No one knew how excited Qiumeng was at the moment. Finally, there was a son who wanted to get married. Ping was concerned about the military affairs. As the mistress of the Ling family, she had to take the overall situation into consideration. She couldn't urge him. Ling Li was useless, so he had been lingering in the brothel. She had lost the hope of holding a grandson. Unexpectedly, there was a turning point. God bless me. Qiumeng quickly prayed for Buddha's blessing in her heart. She went to the temple every year in these years. Finally it worked. She must go to the temple to fulfill her vows. Son, a prodigal who repents is more precious than gold. If you can change your temperament, no matter who you like, it will be easy for you to marry her with the help of the Ling family. Qiumeng immediately seized the opportunity to instill Ling Li the idea of turning over a new leaf. Ling Li smiled bitterly in his heart. That person had known his true colors for a long time. But even so, she didn't show any affection. Sometimes, she hid far away from him and wanted to disassociate herself from him. But he was deeply involved in it and couldn't extricate himself. He endured it for a year and repeatedly told himself that he couldn't do that. But all his efforts disappeared with the gentle hug of Su Li at the auction. He couldn't tell Qiumeng about this situation. After listening to her nagging for a long time, Ling Li said helplessly, Mother, she is not that kind of person. What you said is useless. How did you fall in love with my father? Your father? Qiumeng's eyes flashed with warmth. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle when she thought of the things when she was young. She said, He was a rude man. He didn't know anything about flowers. He directly broke into my family and knelt in front of my parents. He didn't want to leave. Ling Li was stunned. How could his father be so fierce? Qiumeng recalled a lot, but the light in her eyes dimmed, and there was a trace of bitterness in her mouth. Li, no matter what, you must cherish your life. Your mother, your grandmother, and your future wife will not want our cherished relatives to leave you. Do you understand? The sadness spread unexpectedly. It was so strong that it infected Ling Li instantly. Ling Li couldn't help being moved. He understood his mother's pain, but he didn't know that his mother had been hiding all these in her heart. I know, Mother. As long as the Yinma cult existed, the people of the Ling family would not be in danger. The revenge of my father, grandfather, and second uncle. One day, I will catch the murderer and offer his blood to their souls in heaven. At this moment, Ling Li's eyes flashed with coldness. Well, don't talk about these sad things. Qiumeng wiped her tears and quickly returned to her usual posture. She said, You haven't told me which family she is from. Ling Li quickly restrained the coldness in his eyes and turned his head away in embarrassment. His voice was lower than that of a mosquito, but Qiumeng still heard it clearly. Mother, you have seen her. I have seen her? Qiumeng's expression was strange. She thought of countless girls from good families. She had seen more than hundreds of girls from aristocratic families. How could she think of Ling Li's words? Ling Li saw that Qiumeng was confused. His face tightened and he stammered, Yes, you have seen her a few days ago and we went… To what? Qiumeng was anxious. Why did this silly boy take so long just to say the name? Suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind. She blurted out, Is it Su Li? Su Li who went to the hunting ground with us. Ling Li was silent. Qiumeng's smile suddenly spread on her face. She said, The first beauty in Yunjing. The first talented girl in Yunjing. Now she is Princess Li. My son really has a good taste. Mother, don't make fun of me. Ling Li sighed helplessly. There was still a blush on his face. He found that his idea of asking for advice from his mother was completely a joke. Qiumeng nodded secretly. It seemed that her son was serious this time. If it were the other girls in the past, she would have been full of flattery and offended them. This time, he was shy when he said a name. Qiumeng frowned. Su Li. Su Li was the dream daughter-in-law of all the madams in Yunjing City. She was talented and beautiful. Besides, she was taught by Qi Xianqing and had excellent medical skills. Many people stared at her. If Lord Rui didn't stand in her way, Su Li would have been married. Ling Li was her son. In her eyes, he was a good son. But she also knew that Ling Li had a bad reputation. Although he had a good appearance, he was the first playboy in the world. Thinking of this, Qiumeng was worried. It was impossible to rely on her son alone. She had to help him. If necessary, she must make Miss Su marry the Ling family willingly with the help of the whole family. Qiumeng's expression became serious, which frightened Ling Li. Son, I will find a way. You should study more these days. Don't go out and fool around with others. I will ask the tailor to make 2 more new clothes for you. Wait for my good news. Ling Li felt dizzy. He felt that the situation was out of control. Mother, what do you want to do? Don't worry about it. Since you like Su Li, I can't let her feel wronged. I'd better find her by myself, Mother. Go back to study. On this day, Su Li was studying a new prescription in the room. Lord Rui's mansion sent a batch of precious elixirs. Many of them could be used. It seemed that the illusionary powder improved by her could continue to improve its effect. Thinking of this, Su Li suddenly remembered that Ling Li borrowed the illusionary powder from her identity as Mr. Li to deal with the Wei family last time. I forgot to ask Feng Yuan to get it. Su Li couldn't help rubbing her eyebrows. After the auction, there were more things to deal with. She was so busy that her practice time was reduced by half. The so-called reward was nothing but the corpses of the guards of the Wei family. Chapter 235. Miss, there is an invitation from the Ling mansion. Mammy Li came in with an envelope painted with hundreds of flowers. Su Li took it with a strange feeling. Ling Li contacted her so blatantly and used such a fancy envelope. What the hell was he doing? Su Li opened the envelope and saw that it was Qiumeng. She suddenly understood. Little Su Li, the new year is coming. The plum blossoms in the Ling mansion are in full bloom. Aunt Meng made some new snacks. I always feel that something is missing, so I thought of you. Can you come to the Ling mansion to appreciate the plum blossoms? It turned out that Ling Li was not looking for her. Su Li was a little relieved. Her cooking and medical skills were very famous in Yunjing City. It was normal that Qiumeng wanted to ask her for help. But at the end of the year, Qiumeng should be very busy. How could she have time to make new snacks? Miss, the servants of the Ling mansion are still waiting outside. How can you answer? Mammy Li asked eagerly. She was old and had no children. She had long treated Su Li as her own daughter. Now what worried her most was Su Li's marriage. The Ling general's mansion and the Lord Rui's mansion were well matched. General Ling Ping was powerful and righteous, but there was no news that he was going to get married. Ling Li, the third master of the Ling family, was a playboy. Miss should not fall in love with him. Su Li looked up and saw that Mammy Li was murmuring something. She couldn't help but shake her head. She closed the envelope and gave it to her. She said, "Tell the people of the Ling mansion that I will go to the appointment of Madam on time and improve my cooking skills." Mammy Li saw the signature on the letter and couldn't help but smile. It turned out that she thought too much. In the Ling general's mansion, after Qiumeng got Su Li's positive answer, she was excited. She grabbed the invitation and walked to the depth of the Ling general's mansion. There was a small Buddha hall in the backyard of the Ling mansion. In front of the Buddha, there were many memorial tablets of the people of the Ling family who died on the battlefield. After Ms. Gu retired from the court, she almost went to the Buddha hall every day to pray for a moment of inner peace. I have killed countless people in my life. I do not ask for a good end in this life, nor do I ask for good karma in the next life. I only ask that the descendants of the Ling family can receive the blessings of our ancestors and not be invaded by evil. Amit Ba. The prayer beads in her hand rotated smoothly. Ms. Gu closed her eyes slightly and looked peaceful, as if she was integrated into the Buddha statue and became a quiet and peaceful Buddha. Mother, are you inside? Chiu Meng's voice came from outside the room. After Mrs. Gu finished the last sentence, she put down the Buddha beads in her hand, got up slowly, picked up her crutch, opened the door and walked out. Seeing Chiu Meng, she looked serious and asked in a calm tone, Meng, you interrupted me while I was paying my respects to Buddha. I knew something big had happened, so I quickly came out. What happened? Mother, it's a good thing. Chiu Meng told the whole story of Ling Li and showed the invitation to Ms. Gu. Ms. Gu was silent for a long time. Suddenly, she smiled with her eyes narrowed into slits. Su Li is a good girl. Our Ling family can't treat her badly. Since Li is interested, let him pursue Su Li. If Su Li doesn't agree, we can't force him. Mother, you're right. But, Chiu Meng looked hesitant, Li finally has the thought of turning over a new leaf. Even so, we can't take advantage of the innocent girl. Ms. Gu's crutch shook the floor, and her turbid eyes were full of clarity as if she had seen through the world. She said, Meng, I know you are anxious, and so am I. But this matter can't be rushed. Ms. Gu walked in the corridor with her crutch, and Chiu Meng held her arm to keep up with her. For several years, Ling Ping has been supporting the Ling family alone. He has sheltered us from wind and rain. Although Li has a leg disease, he is still a child of the Ling family. He should know what his responsibility is. If he only covets enjoyment and beauty under the protection of Ling Ping, then we can't hurt Su Li. This is the duty of a human being. Do you know? I can see that Li is serious this time. Chiu Meng couldn't help retorting, but Ms. Gu smiled. He is only 17 years old. What he has done most in the past 10 years is to take the little fatty of the Tang family to the brothel. If his father was still alive, he would have broken his legs. Chiu Meng didn't speak. Ms. Gu saw her face was a little pale, but she didn't point it out. She continued, young people are hot-headed, and they can't be taken seriously. Especially Ling Li is full of evil ideas. Our Ling family has been loyal for generations. If Ling Li can't promise Su Li, we can't be ashamed of this matter. Speaking of this, Ms. Gu took the invitation from Chiu Meng's hand. She changed the topic and said with a smile, you act first and report later. Since Su Li wants to come, let's see if they are destined to be together. Chiu Meng slightly opened her beautiful eyes. You agree? When did I say no? A smile flashed in Ms. Gu's eyes, but this matter must be treated with caution. Whether the girl is the princess or not, it depends on her own will. Do you understand? I know. Chiu Meng nodded and looked at Ms. Gu eagerly. Ms. Gu shook her head and laughed. I am old. I am afraid that I can't even knead the dough when I cook. However, our Gu family's ancestors also ran a pastry shop, so the recipe is still here. Come with me to get it. Chiu Meng's eyes were slightly bright. She showed a little girl's temperament in front of Ms. Gu and said with a smile, the snack of the Gu family is my favorite when I was a child. Ms. Gu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You little girl, the thing about Su Li hasn't been settled yet. Do you want her to make snacks for you? The shop of the Gu family is closed. I heard that Su Li is very good at cooking. If I give her the recipe of snacks, maybe I can still taste the taste of those years. You are the mother of 2 grown-up sons. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others? I am the first madam of the imperial court. Who dares to laugh at me? Chiu Meng was full of pride. Ms. Gu smiled and shook her head without saying anything. A trace of doting flashed in her eyes. She was the only daughter-in-law and daughter. She was reluctant to say anything to her. At this moment, in the east courtyard of the Ling mansion, Ling Li received the news from Ling Xian. He was so shocked that he stood up from the wheelchair. What? My mother directly invited Su Li to visit our home. A strange light flashed in Ling Xian's eyes. She gently nodded. Madam went to find the old lady and said that she wanted to make snacks with Miss Su Li. Ling Li suddenly felt a toothache. What the hell did she want to do? Confess? No, absolutely not. He was not ready yet, although he didn't know what to prepare. Master, if you think it is troublesome, you can hide in the east courtyard. Ling Xian's proposal made Ling Li more worried. He didn't tell anyone that he went to see Chiu Meng alone. Of course, he didn't plan to tell anyone that for the time being, but I don't want to hide. Chapter 236. In the Lord Rui's mansion, Yun Yi came to report Su Li's recent situation. Why did Madame Meng of the Ling General's mansion suddenly invite Li to be a guest? Dong Feng Rui frowned and paced back and forth in the room. Yun Yi added, Mrs. Cooking skills are unparalleled. Madame Meng made a new snack and wanted to invite you to help. Dong Feng Rui sneered and said, at the end of the year, the Ling family has a busy account. How can Chiu Meng be so free? I'm afraid that she has ulterior motives. However, Li is back to me now. With her identity, the Ling family won't dare to mess with her. You will accompany Li to the Ling mansion. Other guards of the Yunwei will wait outside to protect her. Su Li just came back to him. He didn't want to marry his daughter so soon. Yes, master. Yun Yi bowed his head and smiled bitterly in his heart. With his cultivation, if he went with Su Li, he was afraid that Su Li would protect them more. Don't tell anyone about my other identity, including my father. Since you have passed my test, the guards of the Yunwei will also be members of the Lin Li building. Do you remember? Thinking of the order of the miss, Yun Yi said nothing and left quietly. They knew the real identity of Su Li because they were recognized by the Mississippi naturally. They wouldn't violate the miss's order. Every time he thought that Mr. Li, who was famous in the capital and could be on an equal footing with Child Li, the hierarch of the Inma cult, was his master, Yun Yi couldn't help but marvel again and again. It was a gamble to follow an unknown master after practicing hard for 20 years. Since he knew the identity of the miss in the auction house, he almost woke up with joy. That sense of honor and joy was difficult for ordinary people to understand. The miss must be a person who would do great things. If they could follow such a wonderful woman, their life must be full of wonderful. When Yun Yi and Lord Rui met, Wu Bin was beside them. However, he didn't find a shadow peeping on the city wall of the Lord Rui's mansion. When did the strength of the Lord Rui's mansion expand so much? Even a young senior in the inborn fourth hurdle is a servant. It's not easy. I must report it to the head of the family. The shadow receded quickly. No one found that he had been there. Yun Yi returned to the affiliated school of the National Academy and told Su Li what Lord Rui said. Father wants you to go with him? Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly. It was not dangerous to go to the Ling mansion above board. If Ling Li had some arrangements, she could use Yun Yi to fool him. She said, follow me and listen to me. Don't be careless. Yun Yi was very surprised. Although General Ling's mansion was an important place in the imperial court and there was a legendary figure like Mrs. Gu, no one could surpass Miss in terms of cultivation. Even General Ling Ping was definitely not Miss's opponent. Why was Miss so cautious? With this idea, Yun Yi and Su Li got on the carriage and went to Ling General's mansion. The servants of the Ling family who had been waiting in front of the door saw the carriage of the Lord Rui's mansion coming and hurriedly opened the door of the general's mansion to let the carriage in. The general's mansion was very spacious and there was a special parking place for carriages. Yun Yi stopped the horse according to the instructions of the servants. He immediately jumped off the carriage and lifted the curtain to welcome Su Li to get off. Su Li exhaled and glanced at the surrounding scenery with her clear eyes. In the previous life, she had only seen the ruins of the Ling family after the fire. Now she could see the real appearance of the Ling general's mansion, which made up for her regret. Princess Li, this way please. Madam has been waiting for you in the lobby since early in the morning. A plump and gentle mammy came over and bowed to Su Li. Su Li followed her and smiled sweetly. She said softly, "What's your name, mammy?" The gentle mammy was immediately flattered. She lowered her head and replied, "Princess, you are too polite. My name is Li Qing." It turns out to be Mammy Li. Mammy Li nodded and led the way. She thought that Princess Li was the kindest girl she had ever seen. She was so similar to Madame. If Su Li could really become the young Madame, it would be a blessing for the servants. After a while, Su Li and Yun Yi came to the lobby. Chiu Meng in brocade clothes saw them and hurriedly came to Su Li. She gently held Su Li's hand and said, "Su Li, I have been waiting for you for a long time. You finally come." Su Li was shocked by Chiu Meng's enthusiasm. She wanted to pull her hand out, but found that Chiu Meng held her hand tightly. Su Li could only nod helplessly and said, "It's the first time for me to come to the general's mansion. I don't know the rules. If there is any violation, please don't blame me. Child, I ask you to help me. There are no rules. Come with me and have a taste of the snacks made by Aunt Meng." Chiu Meng pulled Su Li to the backyard, as if she really just wanted to make snacks. Su Li was a little relieved and followed Chiu Meng. Yun Yi hurriedly followed her. In his eyes, Miss was well-educated, gentle and polite at first. Then Miss became Mr. Li, who was mysterious, powerful and resourceful. However, no matter what the image of Miss was, she was always at ease and had the initiative. It was the first time for him to see Miss being pulled around by Chiu Meng. It was quite interesting and he couldn't help but smile. At this moment, in the east courtyard of the Ling mansion, Ling Li helplessly faced Ling Ping and sighed, "Second brother, I have changed my clothes. I don't need the hairpin, right?" Ling Ping handed the hairpin to Ling Xian and wanted to scold him. But he couldn't help laughing. He could only scold with a smile. "Mother specially called me back from the military camp outside the city for such a small thing. If I don't finish it, I will be scolded again. Xian, what are you waiting for? Su Li is here. How can you meet her when you haven't changed your clothes?" Ling Xian was still in a daze. When she heard Ling Ping's order, she immediately went forward and took off the hairpin on Ling Li's head. His long hair suddenly spilled down like splashing ink, covering his forehead and side face. A pair of deep eyes reflected a little silver line. The young man, who was originally filled with the aura of a playboy, suddenly had a great change in temperament. He was like a shining sharp sword. Ling Ping was stunned for a moment and a picture flashed in his mind. 3 or 4 years ago, he was ambushed. After the bloody battle, the only few lieutenants around him were all dead. He was the only one who was at the end of his strength and still persisted. The enemy still had a small team of cavalry. In addition, the enemy's general, whose cultivation was 1 level higher than his, hadn't fought yet. He was like a mouse that was fooled by the enemy. The setting sun was like blood. It was a fatal situation. He rushed to the cavalry with the determination to die. But at that time, a black shadow fell from the sky. It was a young man with disheveled hair. After a few ups and downs, the sword in his hand turned into thousands of light. All the enemies were beheaded. He still remembered the smell of blood in his nose and the sticky breath. He wanted to go forward and see the face of the young man, but the young man had no intention of getting in touch with him. In the blink of an eye, he jumped into the mountain and disappeared, leaving only his long black hair and the silver light reflected by the sword light. He would be brotherly. Ling Ping was shocked by his own guess. How could he suspect brotherly? Brotherly obviously didn't practice. Seeing the change of Ling Ping's expression, Ling Li immediately thought of the time when he didn't have a mask with him. He had to take off his crown and cover his face with his hair to save his second brother. He knew something was wrong. He quickly covered his face with his hands and turned around. He deliberately shouted angrily, "Xian, what are you doing? Your hair is scattered. It's so ugly. Fix it for me." "Master, please calm down. I'll fix it," Ling Xian said timidly. She quickly tied up Ling Li's hair. Coupled with Ling Li's signature playboy's angry look, Ling Ping's image in his heart was immediately destroyed. He couldn't help but scratch his head. Did he not sleep well last night? So, he had hallucinations. How could someone like Brother Li be that mysterious person? At this moment, in the backyard of Ling General's mansion, Su Li tasted the snack made by Chiu Meng. She couldn't help but be surprised. The snack made by Chiu Meng was not good in appearance and taste. But the unique taste reminded her of the Peiyun cake she tasted in the previous life. How about the snack? Facing Chiu Meng's expectant eyes, Su Li nodded and praised, "The recipe is very special. The taste is also very special. I have never tasted it in my life." Chiu Meng's eyes flashed with the light of appreciation. This girl was not like those young ladies who would try to flatter him as soon as possible. Instead, she was telling the truth. In fact, she liked Su Li. Even if Su Li just praised the snack, she would definitely think that Su Li was too sweet. Chiu Meng sighed and confessed, "Little Su Li, to tell you the truth, I made the snack under the guidance of the old lady." The snack shop of the Gu family was famous in Yunjing City. Later, the old lady joined the army. The Gu family lost its inheritance and the shop was closed. Su Li's eyes flickered. She had heard about the snack of the Gu family in books. It was mentioned in the biography of Mrs. Gu that the Gu family used to make snacks. But there was no more description in the book. She didn't expect that the snack of the Gu family was so famous. But in the previous life, after the destruction of the Ling mansion, the snack house of the Gu family did not belong to the Dongfang family, but to the Wu family. Was the Dongfang family not the opponent of the Wu family? Su Li was confused. Chiu Meng had taken out a copy of the snack recipe and put it in front of her. She looked nostalgic. "I invite you here for nothing else. I just hope that you can restore the taste of the snack of the Gu family. I heard that you like to study cooking since you were a child and you are very talented. The old lady is getting on in years and doesn't have the energy to study dessert recipes. I also know myself. Just by looking at the results I made in one night, I know that I'm not suitable for cooking." Su Li couldn't help but say with a smile, "The old lady is very talented. Even if ordinary people work all night, they may not be able to make such a taste. She is just too busy and has no time." "Really?" Chiu Meng's eyes lit up, "But every time I have time to cook, it is not very delicious." Chapter 237. Chiu Meng was so moved that she almost agreed. But when she thought of the purpose of this trip, she immediately closed her mouth and broke into a cold sweat. It would be a sin if she forgot her son for the sake of cooking. There's still a long way to go. It's not urgent. I'll give you the recipe. Chiu Meng waved her hand. Su Li was slightly shocked and quickly returned the recipe to Chiu Meng. She refused. "Madam, how can I accept a reward without doing anything? Su Li can't accept such a precious snack recipe." Chiu Meng put the recipe in Su Li's hand again. She chuckled and said, "Just take it. This is also the old lady's idea. No one in the Ling family can make snacks. If we keep it, it will be a piece of waste paper. It's better to give it to you. If you can restore the taste of the past, the old lady and I can also buy some snacks to enjoy." Su Li hurriedly shook her head. "Madam, if I can really study it, I will definitely send snacks to you and the old lady. How can I let you spend money?" "Haha, so you agree?" The nostalgia on Chiu Meng's face disappeared. Her expression was quite a feeling that her scheme had succeeded. Su Li was stunned for a moment and nodded helplessly. In order to let her accept the recipe, Chiu Meng even used a trick. It was too shameless. "Oh, I suddenly remember that I have to attend the tea party held by Madame Yu today. Su Li, I have to go out immediately." Chiu Meng suddenly stood up and said anxiously. Her acting skills. Yun Yi was speechless. "It's impolite for me to leave as soon as you come. By the way, my third son is at home. It's better to let him accompany you for a while as a host. Don't refuse. I'll be back soon." Although Chiu Meng's acting skills were poor, she blocked all the reasons for Su Li to refuse. She could only nod. Yun Yi tried his best not to laugh out loud, but it was hard for him to hold it. His face was red. Fortunately, his face was dark enough that no one could see it. Soon, Chiu Meng pretended to leave the Ling mansion. In fact, she returned to the backyard and secretly cheered Ling Li up. "Li, I have done what I should do. You have to work hard for the rest." Su Li put away the recipe and followed the maid to the gate of the east courtyard. She looked up at the vines climbing over the courtyard wall, and a light flashed in her eyes. In his previous life, it was precisely because of this that the Ling family's crime of treason was firmly pinned down, with no chance of escaping. Ling Li really lived here. Obviously, Chiu Meng had already arranged it. When Su Li and Yun Yi were taken to the gate of the east courtyard, they walked in without any notice. Walking through the long corridor, Yun Yi found at least a dozen breaths of warriors of the inborn realm in the dark. He couldn't help but feel speechless. The protection of the Ling mansion for the playboy was no less than that of Su Li. No wonder the Ling mansion had such a prodigal son. At the end of the corridor, there was a small courtyard. The maid standing on both sides of the courtyard door opened the door for Su Li. The scene in the courtyard was reflected in their eyes. The plum blossoms in the courtyard were in full bloom. It was very elegant under the shade of green. It was far from the luxury that Yun Yi imagined. Wasn't Ling Li a playboy? Why did he live in such a shabby courtyard? At the moment when Su Li stepped in, her eyes brightened slightly. She perceived the existence of the tactical matrix. Ling Li didn't know about the tactical matrix. It was mostly the work of the Yinma cult. Although it was not as good as the person who taught her the tactical matrix in her previous life, it was also at the master level. Ling Xian stood under the eaves in front of the door. When she saw Su Li, she looked gentle and smiled. "Princess Li, child has been waiting for you for a long time." Ling Xian bowed her head and made way for Su Li. Su Li looked at her and was about to push the door in. Suddenly, she stopped and said, "Child Ling can use you as a maid. It is really luxurious." Ling Xian's expression changed slightly. She bowed her head and didn't dare to look at Su Li. But she was shocked. Her cultivation was seen through. How could it be possible? Yun Yi didn't hear the hidden meaning in Su Li's words, nor did he see that Ling Xian had the cultivation of the inborn sixth hurdle. He just looked at Ling Xian subconsciously and found that Ling Xian was really beautiful. Her temperament was not like that of a maid, but she was still not as good as his miss. He thought so. Suddenly, he heard Su Li said, "Yun Yi, you also come in with me." "Me too?" Yun Yi was stunned. When he saw Su Li's unquestionable look, he could only bite the bullet and follow her in. He had no experience to help Su Li block the lascivious girls. After entering the room, Yun Yi saw Ling Li sitting in a wheelchair beside the round table. At this moment, Ling Li wore a light golden robe and a tidy crown. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyebrows were straight to the sky. His eyes were shining like stars, and his lips were so thin that they seemed to be sharp. Yun Yi was stunned on the spot. Was this Ling Li, the first playboy in Yunjing? Was there any misunderstanding about him in the rumor? This person was obviously introverted. He was not simple in any way. If he didn't sit in a wheelchair, Yun Yi almost thought that he saw a young master. It was really rare that such a temperament could appear on a disabled child. Ling Li's eyes suddenly fell on Yun Yi. He looked at Su Li with questioning eyes. Su Li didn't seem to see it. She directly stretched out her hand and said, "Give me the thing, and the deal between you and me is completed." What? Miss and Ling Li had known each other for a long time? Yun Yi was surprised again. It seemed that since he entered the east courtyard, he had never been frightened. Ling Li paused and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was afraid that Su Li misunderstood. He didn't mean to use his mother to call her over. But even if he explained it, it was not clear. Recalling the strategy of making a last-minute effort from his mother, Ling Li helplessly lifted the blanket, stood up and walked to the desk. He turned the ink stone, and immediately a downward stone ladder appeared on the ground. "Where are you taking me?" Su Li frowned and asked. Yun Yi was completely dumbfounded. The third master of the Ling family, he actually stood up. Wasn't he disabled since he was a child? Everything was fake. "Miss." Yun Yi couldn't help but look at Su Li, but found that Su Li was not surprised at all. She actually knew it. Su Li didn't say anything. Ling Li glanced at Yun Yi, who was surprised, and said strangely, "Since he is your henchman, you didn't tell him anything?" "Some things can be understood by looking at it. There is no need to say it." Su Li shook her head and pointed to the secret passage. "You dare to dig a tunnel in the Ling mansion. Aren't you afraid of being known by the Dongfang family?" Ling Li's face flashed a touch of evil. He chuckled and said, "I am the most eye-catching and the most inconspicuous in the eyes of Dongfang Shao. He can't search my yard unless the sun rises from the west." Who would think that a playboy who had been disabled for more than 10 years would have a big secret where he lived? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.